him, we're going to protect our party gains, and we're going to do what you want us to do. And I think that's a clear, unified message that they are sending now, that they'll continue to send. The question is what the president does after this. And that's something they can't control, which is why I still think it's a bit of a gamble on their part, particularly in those vulnerable states that are going to be really contested in 2020.
Very good. Wendy Schiller, thanks so much for joining us. Wendy is the professor of political science and public policy at Brown University, giving us her thoughts on the impeachment process, the trial, the Senate trial, which is in its second day, will begin its second day today. They went very late in the evening last night, and we will clearly cover that. Balance of Power, David Weston, coming up. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect here.
Not in my 20 years of being a newsagent have I seen my shop so buzzing. And it's all because it's a double rollover tonight. I've even set some confetti off to celebrate. My customers can't get enough of it. So come on, don't miss it.
Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
This is a live message from the Survivalist Network. There are reports of an impending zombie apocalypse reaching London. But don't panic. Our intel shows that for £199 a month with 0% APR representative, you can locally access the Toyota Hilux Invincible, the only vehicle with the build strength to withstand savage hordes of the undead. Once inside your Toyota Hilux, stay on this frequency for updates. You'll be fine.
0% APR representative on new sales of Hilux Invincible over 42 months. £199 per month. Customer deposit of £10,246 when financed through Access Toyota by 31st March 2020. £12,525 optional final payment. Subject status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
Hey, NFL fan. Can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg's Washington Bureau to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. On the brief today, Emily Watkins on Capitol Hill on day 2 of the Senate trial of President Trump. Sean Don here with me in Washington on President Trump's new trade focus on Europe. And from Milan, Gerald Colton on Luigi Di Maio stepping down as the head of the Five-Star Party. So, Emily, bring us up to speed on where things are. As I understand, all the motions, nobody made any motions, so we're going to actually start with the thing today?
Yes, today, in just about an hour's time, we are going to start seeing the House impeachment managers begin to make their case why the Senate should remove President Donald Trump from office. Yesterday was all about process, exactly how this trial is going to work. And today we start to see them actually make the case. They have 24 hours to use over the next 3 days. And I think there's a lot of people in this building who are hoping that we're not going to be here as late as we were last night.
Well, it's over 3 days rather than 2, so that was a compromise from the majority leader, Mitch McConnell. Whom are we going to hear from? First of all, on the Democrat side, is it all going to be Adam Schiff?
I don't expect it to be all Adam Schiff. You saw yesterday Schiff make opening and closing remarks, but you also got to see all of the other 6 impeachment managers take some time and make some comments. I mean, all of them have been chosen for very specific reasons, based on their background, based on their experience levels. And so I imagine that all of them will take a turn at the podium today to help make the case against Donald Trump.
Yeah, one of those managers we heard from actually last night was Jerry Nadler, and he got into something, a skirmish with Pat Cipollone, the chief counsel for the president, and it actually required the Chief Justice to intercede and say, gentlemen, let's calm down.
Yes, around, I think it was 1 a.m. in the morning. I mean, remember, this is a very unique experience for many of these senators. Usually senators don't spend a lot of time in the chamber. They're not sitting there for hours and hours on end. And so there is a bit of an adjustment period into figuring out sort of how this is going to work, what tone is going to be set. Adam Schiff used some language on the floor yesterday that I think a couple people were debating whether or not it was appropriate. It was totally loud, but yesterday, yes, you did see them sort of come down and say, hey, when it comes to partisan bickering, that needs to be limited.
Okay, Emily, thank you so much. That's Emily Wilkins reporting once again from Capitol Hill. And now let's turn to Sean Donnan right here with me in Washington. He is our resident trade expert. We heard from President Trump this morning in this news conference, and a fair amount of it actually was about trade, and specifically about European trade.
Yeah, so Europe is the great unfinished piece in Donald Trump's trade agenda. He has wanted for a few years to kind of rebalance things with the U.S., the EU. There is a big trade deficit with the EU. A lot of it focused on cars, and Trump hatched this idea a couple of years ago to level auto tariffs at European imports to try and force Europe to the table. Well, over the last couple of days in Davos, he's doubled down on that idea again. He's doing it with a new European Commission and a new European Commission president in Ursula von der Leyen, and trying the whole thing all over again. The big question, of course, is after 2 years of trying this approach, whether it'll generate a big deal or the sort of deal that he can crow about going into the election.
As I recall, we were on the brink, and there sort of was a truce that pulled us back from it. He has in his back pocket the autos, but one of the issues is agriculture, because as we know, the Europeans jealously guard their agriculture.
Absolutely. So in July 2018, Jean-Claude Juncker, the then European Commission president, came over here to Washington to try and stop these auto tariffs from going ahead, and they hatched what became known as the Rose Garden Truce, which basically allowed negotiations on some industrial tariffs and some regulatory issues to go ahead, and for the U.S. to hold off on these auto tariffs. But that quickly kind of ground to a halt because the Europeans thought they had an agreement from the Trump administration not to include agriculture in any talks. The French in particular are very opposed to some of the issues that the U.S. would raise in any agriculture talks. And Congress intervened and said, we're not going to have any negotiations with Europe unless agriculture is hatched. What I'm told is the Europeans may be finding a bit of a way around this in talking about some regulatory issues with agriculture in a new round of negotiations, but whether this will work, again, is a big question.
That's the French in agriculture. What about the French in digital tax? Because as I understand it, the EU basically said individual member states can go their own way. Mr. Macron stepped up right away, and that really got the president's attention.
Absolutely. And so the president before Christmas threatened to impose tariffs on French champagne, French cookware, French cheese, going as high as 100% tariff on some of those things if the French went ahead with this digital services tax or didn't unilaterally disarm on it. The French have refused to do that. They say they will keep this tax in place as long as there is no multilateral agreement on tax. There are some negotiations going on at the OECD.
Well, those have been going on for a while. What are the prospects of an OECD deal, really?
Well, that's a huge question. But what the U.S. and France have agreed to this week in Davos, and we saw it with Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron earlier this week in a phone call, and today again with the French finance minister and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin agreeing to kind of step up those negotiations towards a multilateral deal, and the French agreeing that they'll kind of forego the next tranche of payments due on this digital tax. Again, the Trump administration claiming that tariffs have forced the French to cave a little bit and engage in another negotiation. But whether that negotiation is going to go anywhere is a real big question.
So President Trump's news conference this morning was remarkable, not just for his focus on Europe, but also he shared the stage with Roberto Azevedo, who is the head of the WTO, saying, here's Roberto, we're really friends now, we're going to reform the WTO. Is this a big move on WTO's part? Because this has, again, been something the president has really been fixated on.
Absolutely. So the president for a long time has talked about the WTO as one of the worst trade agreements ever created, of course, created in the 1990s as a result of the Uruguay round of negotiations that the U.S. actually led at the time. Roberto Azevedo is in that kind of thankless place of having to mediate Donald Trump and the rest of the world who are the WTO's members and try and find a path towards reform. He briefed the president today on the state of those discussions. My understanding is they're not going anywhere real fast, but the president grabbed him, pulled him on stage, and really wants to take ownership of that. Again, another negotiation. We're going to have to see where this goes.
Another negotiation. He's the art of the deal. Okay. Thanks very much to Sean Donnan, our resident trade expert here in Washington. And now we're going to go to Italy and Gerald Colton. He is over in Milan, and there's big developments over there. We have Luigi Di Maio stepping down as the head of his party. What's going on? Why now, Gerald?
Well, you're probably familiar with Luigi Di Maio if you follow Italian politics. He's basically the face of the five-star movement, one of the key parties here in Italy. The support for the party, both internally and externally, has been hemorrhaging over recent months. The poll numbers are quite poor. Support has been slipping from inside. In fact, some lawmakers have even left the party, some even going to the opposition. And even more importantly, the poll figures for coming regional election this weekend look very, very poor indeed for Five Star. So really, somebody has to take the fall for this, and it's going to be Di Maio.
So, Gerald, what does this mean for the coalition?
Well, initially today, the markets appeared concerned that this might mean the coalition could fall apart. We could see snappy elections. We could see even a victory for Matteo Salvini's League party. I think that on second thought, the coalition is made up of a couple parties that really need each other. Five Star is weakened, as I said. The other party in the coalition, the Democrats, are not strong enough to take on the League themselves. I think neither of these parties really, it's in neither of these parties' interest to face a national election. So I think that they're going to stick together. They're going to try to find a way to forge ahead, even though they're really, frankly, two groups that don't like each other very much.
So, Gerald, finally, if the Five Star is losing support, as they have been for some time, is it going to one place? Where are those supporters going?
That's a very good question. A lot of that support is going to the League, in fact. The League's numbers have grown as Five Star's figures have fallen. And that's the main concern for both parties, really, is how strong the League is now. It's stronger than when Salvini pulled out of the government this summer.
Okay, thank you so much to Gerald Colton. He's reporting today from Milan. And now it's time to get a check on how the markets are reacting to today's top stories. Joining us now is Abigail Doolittle in New York. So, Abigail, I'm not sure it's what we've talked about so far. Is it we're not as concerned about that virus coming from Wuhan?
That's probably the bigger influence today, David, because the bulls are back in charge. Yesterday was a tad risk off on concerns around that deadly virus. But today, as you can see, lots of green on the screen, record highs here in the U.S. for the major averages, including the S&P 500, the NASDAQ. You can see the NASDAQ really outperforming up 0.5%. That is due to tech being the best sector on the day. And behind that tech strength, take a look at the SOX, so the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, really outperforming up 1.5%. This before Texas Instruments reports tonight, kicking off the chips reporting in this particular earnings season, an all-time high there for the SOX. But one interesting divergence down for a third day in a row now, David, is the Dow Transports. However, certainly not down. Take a look at Tesla over the last 2 days. This morning, right on the open, crossing that $100 billion market cap, a milestone. These shares now up an extraordinary more than 200% since the lows last spring. And again, over the last 2 days, up more than 15%. On the year, up more than 40%. It's really pretty incredible. So the bulls there on Tesla really very much in charge. As for other big drivers on the day, it's really earnings. If we take a look at some of the movers here, we see IBM up about 3%. They put up a rare sales beat, the first time in 6 quarters where sales actually grew grew. Profits also beat. That may have to do with the Red Hat acquisition. Cloud really very strong for them. Netflix, on the other hand, down 2%. The U.S. subscribers, that was a miss, putting up 420 new U.S. subscribers versus the estimate of 600,000. International subscribers beat, but valuation very high, price for perfection. Shares certainly not acting perfectly. And if you can believe it, David, the last time those shares put an all-time high all the way back in June of 2018. That stock really has its work cut out for itself. Johnson & Johnson, a disappointing quarter, down 1.1%. And then, as I was mentioning, after the bell, the reporting season for the chips will be kicked off by Texas Instruments. Right now, pretty strong performance. Hopefully their results will be as strong. Lots of expectations that the sector is bottoming out. We'll need more proof through the earnings, and we'll start to see that tonight, David, with Texas Instruments reporting.
Thanks so much, Abigail Dula. We're going to come back to Johnson & Johnson in just a minute. But first, let's turn to Mark Crumpton for Bloomberg First Word News.
David, in Davos, Switzerland, President Trump today lashed out at his accusers in the Senate impeachment trial. He called the trial bad for the country. Still, Mr. Trump broke with some of his Republican defenders. He says he would like witnesses to be called. Democrats are likely to begin presenting their case against the president today. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he'd be happy to testify in the impeachment trial if he's forced by law to do so. But Pompeo also told reporters traveling with him in Kingston, Jamaica, that he's not following the trial. Bloomberg's chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli will have an interview with Secretary Pompeo coming up in the next hour on Bloomberg Television and radio. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is downplaying talk that trade discussions with China will be wrapped up by this November's presidential election. Speaking at a panel at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Secretary Mnuchin said there's no deadline to the Phase 2 negotiations with China. Under a Phase 1 agreement signed by both nations last week, some sanctions on China will be eased and Beijing will step up its purchases of American goods. China is ramping up efforts to contain a respiratory virus that's killed 17 people and infected hundreds. Hong Kong has now reported its first case of the illness, and there's been one diagnosis here in the United States. The fear is the disease could spread in China when hundreds of millions of people travel during the Lunar New Year holiday. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. In New York, I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. David, back to you in Washington.
Thanks so much, Mark. Coming up, Johnson & Johnson reported its fourth quarter earnings this morning. Its chief financial officer, he's Joseph Wolk, is here to take us through those earnings. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Jason Kelly and Carol Massar speak to some of the most...
Not in my 20 years of being a news agent have I seen my shop so buzzing. And it's all because it's a double rollover tonight. I've even set some confetti off to celebrate. Our customers can't get enough of it. So come on, don't miss it.
Lotto from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run, mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run, mix it.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Technology shares leading the advance of the S&P 500 today after China moved to contain the spread of the deadly virus that rattled the international markets. Now, stocks did come off their highs of the day as China raised the death toll to 17. And Constance Hunter, chief economist at KPMG, says the deadly respiratory virus still bears close watching by investors.
I think if the proper measures are put in place, there's no need to panic. On the other hand, it bears watching, and it's certainly an area of concern because China can ill afford to have anything slowing its growth at this point.
And low mortgage rates seem to be doing the trick for America's property market. Sales of previously owned homes advanced in December, the fastest pace since early 2018. Dow's up 6 points, S&P 500 up 6. The Nasdaq Composite Index is up 39 points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm John Tucker.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Johnson & Johnson reported its fourth quarter earnings this morning with sales up year over year, but missing analyst estimates, which took some off the share price. We welcome now from New Brunswick, New Jersey, Joseph Wolk. He is Johnson & Johnson Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. So, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. So let's start out with the big question, which is the analysts got it wrong. Why? Did you underperform or did they overestimate?
David, thanks for having me here today. We're very pleased with the results, not just for the fourth quarter, but for the entire year. With respect to the investment community, we're talking on $20 billion for the quarter, about a $30 million disconnect. We can point to some one-time events, specifically in our medical device unit, where we had some elevated sales in Q3. So I wouldn't say anybody got it wrong. I think it's just solid performance across all three of our segments.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but it looks like really oncology and immunology helped drive these numbers. And I know that Alex Gorski specifically called them out, how well they're doing. Yes. How much are they driving your results? And are you at all concerned about biosimilars and generics eating into that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, David. In terms of oncology and immunology, we've got great scientists there that for better than a decade now have been bringing just transformative medicines in immunology, specifically around psoriasis, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis. So we point to products like Tremfya in psoriasis. I think it grew 55% year on year comparatively versus the fourth quarter of 2018. That continues to show best-in-class data. It was the first IL-23 out there. With Stelara, we're addressing patient needs for Crohn's disease. It's a debilitating disease that has tremendous uptake, but actually had its start as a product with psoriasis. So we continue to expand that portfolio with oncology. Imbruvica and Darzalex continue to perform extremely well, moving into front lines of therapy. So more patients are getting treated earlier, and we know that's the best diagnosis in terms of, or prognosis for better outcomes. With Darzalex, we're particularly excited about a subcutaneous formulation that we hope to get approved sometime around the first half of this year. That will take the infusion time of 6 hours down to about 5 to 10 minutes for patients, and we think that's just a big advancement for patient convenience.
Yeah, all really good news for Johnson & Johnson and for its shareholders. But what about the biosimilars? What about the generics? Are they on the horizon? Do you see any threat coming up in the future to some of that leading in immunology and oncology?
So we have had actually an impact from biosimilars this year. It was about $2 billion incremental to what we experienced in 2018. So we've been dealing with biosimilars for a few years. We had a number of products that faced loss of exclusivity. So we had biosimilar and generic competition. So, David, the great results of 5.8% growth that you see from our pharmaceutical unit was in spite of a $2 billion headwind. So we have dealt with it. We will continue to deal with it. And it's an important part of the system. As we come up with new transformational medicines, we want to make sure, as all good healthcare companies do, that there's room for those to be available for patients. And so having generics and biosimilars as part of the equation in terms of overall healthcare costs is an important part.
As CFO of Johnson & Johnson, I know, Mr. Wolk, you are always looking at your portfolio, what you want to add, what you want to take away. As I understand, you referred to possible deletions of underperforming businesses today in the earnings call. Do you have any nominees? And just as important, perhaps, because I suspect you're going to say I'm not going to name any companies or any lines of business. How will you judge that? Is that margin? Is that operating profit? How do you judge whether it's underperforming?
Yep. So we look really with a mindset of being number one or number two in the markets in which we play. So do we have that level of innovation, that level of execution that ensures that we are well positioned within the markets? And if we're not there currently, we want to make sure we've got a real good game plan. When those plans don't come to fruition, and sometimes they don't, we'll look to see if we can create value for shareholders by doing something else with that asset. Similarly, though, we look to add where we can. We can complement our business. About 40% of our growth over the last decade has come from inorganic opportunities.
And finally, Mr. Wolk, talk about the donut hole, the so-called donut hole Medicare. We hear about this a lot, which, as I understand, is narrowing, and that's costing companies like Johnson & Johnson some money. Can you put any numbers around that? How much is it costing you?
Yeah, I won't put any specific numbers around it, David. What I can talk about is pricing in general, and we understand why that is a topic of conversation for the past couple of years, and certainly as we head into an election year here in the U.S. Overall pricing for Johnson & Johnson's products over the last 3 years, have declined, and the average on that is about 4%. So that's not a cumulative number. That's 4% each and every year for the last 3 years. We know the White House of Economic Advisors came out with a report recently said that pharmaceutical pricing has declined in its most recent study. We need to get more of those discounts that are being generated for insurers and governments into the hands of the patients who need the most. People are walking into their pharmacies on a monthly basis paying $50, $75 for a copay when they used to pay $5 and $10. We need to make sure that that's addressed so that these great medicines that are coming, not just from Johnson & Johnson, but across the industry, are available to patients most in need.
You mentioned drug pricing overall. In your projections going to 2020 and beyond, are you putting anything in your numbers for possible legislation on Capitol Hill? Because a lot of people are talking about something maybe even this year.
Yeah, we see continued pricing pressure. As I mentioned, with Johnson & Johnson in the industry, we have seen price reductions over the last number of years. We continue to see that trend. It usually is around some of the more competitive spaces. If you think about diabetes drugs, if you think about psoriasis drugs, where there's a lot of competition, just as a free market economy should work, you're going to see price negotiation a little bit more intense.
Okay, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being with us today. That's Joseph Wolk. He is Johnson & Johnson Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer. Still ahead, Boeing is struggling, which means that its suppliers are not far behind. Aerospace company Arconic is in the crosshairs, and it's our stock of the hour today. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
Asset managers who seize boredom. Fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. 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 Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it out of boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run. Mix it.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Here at Tesco, we're celebrating over 100 years of great value with even more great prices that take you back. Like a 6-pack of Mr. Kipling Angel Slices, now half price, from £1.80 to just 90p. All this week at Tesco.
Selected larger stores subject to availability. Offer ends 27th of January.
Chilly January days in London are tough enough without a broken boiler. Keep your home warm and working this winter with 2 years interest-free credit and your boiler installed by one of our expert engineers. Plus, you'll get a 5-year British Gas warranty. And we can even quote by video call after work or on weekends. Get a quote by the 29th of February, and you can also get £200 off a new boiler, or £400 off for our existing home care customers. Search British Gas New Boiler. Conditions apply.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston. Time now for our stock of the hour. Arconic is one of the worst performers in the S&P 500 today. The stock is sinking nearly 3% after it was downgraded by Longbow because of the Boeing 737 MAX. Kaylee Lyons is here with more. So I think we can blame almost everything at this point on the Boeing 737 MAX. But here's one more, Kaylee.
At least for today, yes, this may be all of Boeing's fault. The analyst over at Longbow Research, his name's Chris Olin, downgraded the stock to underperform from neutral
April because of the impact of Boeing. Of course, we had Boeing saying yesterday that it doesn't see the 737 MAX returning to service until mid-year, around June. That's another 3-month delay. The FAA, for its part, saying that it actually has no timetable, so that could potentially get delayed even further. And Longbow sees this could have a really meaningful impact on Arconic's top line, especially he says that it could bring earnings per share down to around $2 a share and knock potentially $400 to $500 million off of commercial aircraft revenue. The reason why it's such a big impact, David, is because Boeing is one of Arconic's top customers. Actually, it's second largest in terms of revenue, with about 8.3% of the revenue share. And we know that Boeing has stopped production for the time being of its Boeing 737 MAX, which could be a significant hit to Arconic's top line here.
So I understand there was a spin-off in the works. What does this do to that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The spin-off, what is going to stay in the business is Howmet, which is its aerospace division. The company is planning on spinning off what will keep the Arconic name. That's that global aluminum rolled business. And that is much lower in terms of profitability, lower margin, only about 9% in the latest quarter, whereas the aerospace business margin was above 20%. So they're trying to focus more in that area that was seen as a possible catalyst for valuation, considering that it is higher margin. But Longbow noting that timetable may get pushed back because of the 737 MAX, David.
Okay, Kaylee, thank you so very much. That's Bloomberg's Kaylee Alliance reporting from New York. Up next, House Republicans are heading for the charge for the impeachment of President Trump. We're going to talk with one of the people who was a Republican from Louisiana when he was in the House. When he led the charge, he is Bob Livingston of Louisiana. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are posting gains on better than forecast earnings, and after China took steps to contain the spread of a deadly virus. The Dow is up 18 points, S&P up 7, the Nasdaq climbing 43. Shares of IBM are up after reporting fourth quarter revenue that beat analyst estimates. Good news for Tesla. The company's market value climbed past Volkswagen's for the first time to more than $100 billion. Consumer shopping habits are shifting online, and that's hurting some brick-and-mortar stores. 40 Bed Bath & Beyond stores will close in the first half of the year, and greeting card and stationery chain Papyrus is closing all of its 254 stores over the next 4 to 6 weeks. And a new report suggests the majority of Americans are just one unexpected bill away from financial hardship. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Revisions, return policies. There are so many ways to redo a decision.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Do they have any path other than the courts?
Except here, we have to get it right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war. Are there winners?
So that you can too.
How does your modeling have to pivot to reflect a different scenario?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From Washington, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Mark Crumpton in New York.
David, the stage is set for House impeachment managers to begin making their case against President Trump. According to rules approved by the Senate early today, they'll have 24 hours over 3 days to make arguments. The president's defense team will get equal time. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he'd be happy to testify at the impeachment trial if he's forced to do so by law. Secretary Pompeo also says he'll travel to Ukraine, quote, before too long. He tells Bloomberg that Ukraine sits at the edge between democracy and tyranny. Pompeo also accused Iran of spreading a destabilization cancer around the globe. Bloomberg's chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli will have an interview with Secretary Pompeo coming up in the next hour on Bloomberg Television and radio. President Trump is hinting that sanctions on Iraq are still a possibility. Mr. Trump met with Iraq's president in Davos, Switzerland today on the sidelines of the annual World Economic Forum. It was the first meeting between the two since a U.S. drone strike on Iraqi soil killed a top Iranian general. When asked whether his administration was still considering sanctions on Iraq, President Trump said, quote, "We'll see what happens because we have to do things on our terms," end quote. United Nations experts are calling for an investigation into allegations that the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, was involved in hacking the cell phone of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos. Officials say information now suggests that Bezos' phone was hacked following a WhatsApp exchange with the Crown Prince. Saudi Arabia's finance minister spoke exclusively with Bloomberg in Davos.
I think the embassy in Washington, Saudi embassy in Washington, issued a statement last night or early this morning saying clearly that this is absurd. They called for an open investigation so that people know what happened.
A report by United Nations experts says the alleged hack may have been an effort to influence or even silence the reporting of the Washington Post, which Bezos owns. The Saudis were blamed for murdering Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
Is abuse of power an impeachable offense?
Well, you're going to talk to the lawyers about it, but I will tell you, there's nothing here. I had a very innocent conversation with a very fine gentleman from the Ukraine, and it was based on that.
That was President Trump addressing questions about his impeachment in Davos earlier today. Welcome now Bob Livingston, who has his own experience with proceedings like these, serving as Republican congressman from Louisiana and for a time as Speaker of the House of Representatives when it was William Jefferson Clinton who was the target. So, Mr. Speaker, welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you very much, David. Good to be here.
Let me pick up on that question specifically. Do you believe it can be, put aside the facts of this particular case, can it be an impeachable offense to abuse your power when you're President of the United States?
I think that the charge of abuse of power is so vague and so widespread that any president of the United States could have been brought up on that charge. In this case, I think it's just really baseless because it deals with a Ukrainian call, the transcript of which everybody has. Everybody can judge for themselves. And frankly, I've looked at it as a former prosecutor. I don't see any abuse of power. When we dealt with President Clinton 21 years ago, there were some firm crimes. There was obstruction of justice. There was perjury, subornation of perjury. And the fact is that President Clinton had testified under oath, and he'd lied. And there were people in prison at the time, both in the military and in the civilian corps, who had done exactly the same thing under exactly the same circumstances, but they were in jail. So when you contrast that you could justify that as an abuse of power or a crime. In this case, I don't see a crime at all.
So fair enough. There's a clear distinction between, on the one hand, the Clinton impeachment, on the other hand, the Trump administration impeachment, in the fact that they did not allege a crime in these two articles of impeachment. On the other hand, in the case of William Jefferson Clinton, while there were crimes alleged, in effect, ultimately he lost his bar membership.
Exactly.
As a practical matter, for perjury. There was no accusation that what he did, the wrongdoing he did, was misusing his office in order to continue himself in office, which under the, as you know, the Federalist Papers, that's exactly what impeachment was going to. Is there a situation, put aside again the facts of this case, where a president of the United States could ask a foreign power to help him continue in office that would be impeachable?
Well, in this case, the president didn't really do that, did he? He asked the president of Ukraine to help us unlock some corruption and to discover corruption, whether the Bidens were involved or anything else. Ukraine was notably one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and as it affected the United States, we were giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Ukraine, something that frankly wasn't done under the Obama administration. But we were giving them that money, and in order to put ties on the money, he wanted to make sure that it was being spent correctly. You could say the Democrats have said that's an abuse of power. I personally don't see it, but again, it depends on which party in the House of Representatives is in control, and they could virtually call any president in the history of the country guilty of abuse of power.
And also, as we're seeing, which party is in control in the Senate as well. It goes both ways. And I want to go to exactly that point because, of course, President Trump is on trial in some sense in this proceeding. Also, I wonder if our entire system of government is on trial. That is to say, the American people are watching it. And if you look back in 1999, when there was the trial of President Clinton, and you look today, it's almost as if people are saying exactly the same things, just switching depending on whether they have an R or a D after their name.
I think many of the arguments are identical, without a doubt. In fact, many of the speeches are identical, except they're being said by somebody else. So you're absolutely right. But again, I have to contrast the underlying foundation of these charges. And in this case, I'm sorry, there's no crime alleged. Back then, there were specific crimes alleged. And when the founders drafted the Constitution, basically they were saying it's high crimes, misdemeanors, and then they specified bribery or treason. Now, you don't have any of that. In fact, the Democrats have been charging this president since the day he got elected and saying that they wanted impeachment. They had spent 2 years on a foolish goose hunt for collusion with Russia. That came to nowhere. There's been this Ukrainian thing. There was the firing of Comey. There were the firing of some of these other people. All of those were within the power of the President of the United States, and they could be interpreted in any way the majority wanted them to be.
So as a former member of the House of Representatives and a former Speaker of the House, are you concerned that we are lowering the bar on impeachment overall? That we'll just have an impeachment almost with every president now? It's almost a political tool that you turn to.
David, I think that's a danger. Look, there were a lot of people that thought Bill Clinton should never have been impeached. They said it was basically about sex.
By the way, President Trump said that today in his news conference. He said Clinton should never have been impeached.
Well, I was on the other side of that, so I guess I have to disagree with him. But the fact is that there were real crimes. Now there are no crimes, and so you have to ask yourself, well, if we're going to use this one as a bar, yes, every president from now on could be impeached.
Okay. I really appreciate you being with us today, Mr. Speaker. That is Bob Livingston of the Livingston Group, founding partner. He's former Congressman of Louisiana and former Speaker of the House of Representatives. Coming up, President Trump shared the podium with the head of the WTO today as they both called for reform in the International Trade Organization. We talk with former Deputy Director General of the WTO, Rufus Yerxa. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
You're not supposed to.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM/AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. The Nasdaq headed for a record, the S&P 500 eking out in advance. And Harvard economics professor Carmen Reinhardt, speaking from Davos, Switzerland, says the U.S. economy is not too hot, not too cold.
We're actually at a sweet spot. It looks like growth is fairly good, not, exceptional. Inflation remains pretty subdued.
IBM rallying after revenue beat estimates. The Nasdaq right now up 42, the S&P 500 up 5. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Well, people have talked for years about reforms in the World Trade Organization, but now it looks like maybe something might just get done, as President Trump made it a priority in his news conference in Davos today, where he was joined by Roberto Azevedo, the WTO head.
Talking about a whole new structure for the deal, or we'll have to do something, but the World Trade Organization has been very unfair to the United States for many, many years.
We welcome now Rufus Yerxa. He is former Deputy Director General of the WTO and former Deputy United States Trade Representative. Ambassador Yerxa is now President of the National Foreign Trade Council here in Washington. Welcome, Rufus. Good to be with you in Washington. So give us your sense of what's going on. As I say, Roberto Azevedo was up there. You introduced him. You made a few remarks. Is there a rapprochement or coming together now of the United States with the WTO?
Well, look, I think President Trump still is very skeptical of the WTO. He hasn't been a big fan of trade agreements generally and multilateralism. He doesn't like to see things that are going to restrict his power to, start tariff fights and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, he seems to be acknowledging that the WTO is there and that the U.S. wants to engage in it. We'll have to see how that relationship goes. Obviously, there will still be a lot of tension between the big players. You see the fights going on between Trump and the Europeans now, and of course, the China tensions will continue. Well, those are the countries you have to make a deal with if you want to reform the WTO. So it's not going to be easy.
But as a student of the WTO, the United States has sort of cut off a lot of their funding and really threatened them with budgets. Have they got their attention? Is it possible that will shake something loose and have some reforms? Because you've said in the past there's room for reform in the WTO.
There's always room for reform, and in fact, there's a reform program that's been going on for a couple of years. There's been very robust talks on digital trade, for example, and how to update the rules of the WTO for the digital economy, which were agreed to back in Buenos Aires at the last WTO ministerial. But the question now is, first of all, he has threatened to cut off funding. They didn't actually cut it off. The U.S. only pays about 13% of the WTO's budget. So remember, this is an organization with 160-plus countries. It's not easy for the U.S. to dictate all the rules there. We've got to engage in negotiation. There is room for maneuver now, and particularly if the U.S., the Europeans, the Japanese, and others can work on things like subsidies. There needs to be better reform of the subsidy rules in the WTO to deal with a mixed economy like China.
Well, you have the subsidies in China, a mixed economy without a doubt. Can you deal with that with China? Because the Europeans have said they really want to help us on that, work with us on that, without dealing with things like the common agricultural policy in Europe. I mean, some would say that there's a form of subsidy going on right now in Europe. By the way, you could say that about our own agricultural program.
Yeah, well, look, the U.S. and Europe have been fighting about agricultural subsidies for a long time. We've actually made progress. In fact, Azevedo got an agreement back in Nairobi, a couple of ministerials passed, where he strengthened the subsidy rules on agriculture. So there's been some progress on agriculture, including between the U.S. and Europe. I think they're capable of dealing with each other in the WTO on that. The bigger question is, how do you develop an alliance of countries to push China in the right direction? The problem I've seen all along is that the U.S. wants China to change, but we're busy starting trade fights with the Europeans and with our best allies in the WTO system. And, you know, Trump has to change his tune there. He has to start working with these countries, showing some leadership. If he expands the trade war with Europe, for example, by putting tariffs on autos, it's going to be very hard to get cooperation with the Europeans on how to deal with China in the WTO.
Address, if you can, briefly, one specific issue, which is the digital tax. Because you talk about digital trade with WTO. We also have the OECD looking at this.
Right.
What's the proper body to resolve that problem?
So, you know, there's always this issue of what does WTO deal with? It deals with trade. And then what do organizations like OECD deal with? They deal with tax. And what's the intersection between taxation and trade rules? And certainly a digital services tax raises all kinds of issues about whether you're guaranteeing foreign companies national treatment. That is the same treatment you give to your own companies. The big fight we have with the French now is they've created a digital services tax that seems to focus only on big American companies and exempts a lot of French companies. And that becomes a fight in the WTO if we can't resolve it. But there is work going on in the OECD to try to get an agreement.
Yeah, as I say, it's not lost on President Trump how it would affect U.S. digital companies.
No, exactly. And, you know, he's shaking things up. The real question is, will people trust him to do deals that rely on good faith implementation by all members? That's the issue. It's an issue of trust more than anything.
Okay. Thank you so much to Rufus Yerxa. He's National Foreign Trade Council President, and we're going to be having more with him coming up next in the next hour on Bloomberg Radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folk.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Bloomberg Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli has been traveling with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Kevin just spoke to the Secretary in an exclusive interview from Jamaica. Kevin started by asking Secretary Pompeo about Iran-backed Hezbollah finding a foothold in South America.
When you see the scope and reach of what the Islamic Republic of Iran regime has done, can't forget they tried to kill someone in the United States of America. They've conducted assassination campaigns in Europe. This is a global phenomenon. When we say that Iran is the leading destabilizing force in the Middle East and throughout the world, it's because of this terror activity that they have now spread as a cancer all across the globe.
This past week, as you've traveled the world, we started in Germany and Berlin, where you met with world leaders, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. You talked, I'm sure you talked about Iran, but as you know, Europe has not always followed the same strategic route as the United States when it comes to Iran. Did your meetings with European leaders move the needle in that direction at all?
Yes, sir. Look, we've been clear. We've had a different view on the right way to proceed to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, that their missile program is contained, and that this terror regime we were just talking about is pushed back. They've never wavered from the shared objective. They just had a different view about how to proceed. But if you've seen what Iran has done even in the past few weeks, right, it's nuclear extortion. They're now threatening to leave the NPT. So I did. I talked with my European counterparts while I was there. They have now taken a step under the JCPOA to invoke the dispute resolution mechanism. I think not only they, but the world can now see that this rogue regime has no intention of complying with the central tenets of what that agreement contained, and the world must unite to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. I saw President Macron say that yesterday. I know he means it now. We need to work together to achieve it.
So when you say they have no intention, then how do you get Tehran to go to the United Nations, to come to the United Nations, to work with the international community aside from the sanctions and the various military response options?
Ultimately, the people of Iran will get what they so richly deserve, a regime that behaves in ways that are consistent with the value sets of the Iranian people. In the end, the Iranian people will demand their government. You see it in the protests. You see it when they walk around American flags that were put down by the Islamic Republic's leadership in an attempt to show they could show pictures of Iranian people walking over American flags. And in fact, people go out of their way not to do that. This isn't about Iran versus the United States. This is about a regime that has treated its own people terribly. The world can see it. It's a regime that even now the IAEA is trying to figure out how nuclear material got to places that the Iranian leadership said it would not be. And so this is a global risk. President Trump started his remarks the night after an American response by saying Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. It is our primary purpose. But we have a broader set of objectives. We just want them to behave like a normal nation and re-enter the society, the community of nations.
And traveling with you all week, I mean, I'm struck by just the range of the hotspot issues around the world that are going on. And back home, the only thing that they're talking about is impeachment and the Senate impeachment trial. Did that come up at all in your conversations with world leaders? And has the Senate impeachment trial endangered U.S. interests and reputation around the world?
You know, Kevin, it hasn't come up today, except where I received a question at a press conference about it, so it came up.
And you said you would testify.
I've said consistently, if the law required me to testify, I would do so. It hasn't come up. It almost never comes up in meetings with my counterparts. There's too many important things going on in the world. America is too close a partner to have with countries in the Caribbean region here in Kingston. They care about so much that we do. They're such good friends and allies. They see the noise in Washington, but it is not something they would think in the time that we have between us that they would raise.
And House Democrats are saying that Rudy Giuliani orchestrated a shadow foreign policy. And can you assure diplomats serving overseas all around the world in dangerous places that that's not the case?
Yeah, the foreign policy we were executing then is the same foreign policy we're executing today with respect to Ukraine. It's an important country. It sits at this crossroads. It's under enormous pressure from Russia. President Trump has taken actions to counter Russia that President Obama refused to take. We've provided defensive systems for the Ukrainian people so that they can defend themselves. We've supported this new leader, President Zelensky, in his efforts to stamp out corruption and to build his democracy. We're continuing to do that. Our policy with respect to Ukraine has been set on the fundamental principles of reducing the footprint of corruption and helping the Ukrainian people build up a democracy while under threat from the Russians in the east and southeast.
You've said that you look forward to going there, that you have other issues that you want to discuss with them. Or is that still the case?
Yeah, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there before too long. I had a trip planned, and then we had an issue arise in the Middle East that I had to attend to. While that issue is not behind us, there's still a lot of work to do there. I'll get to Ukraine before too long. To take a step back,
why should Americans care about what happens in the Ukraine? What's the broader theme here? Who's explaining to the American people why U.S.-Ukraine policy matters to the average American?
Yeah. So Ukraine sits at the edge between democracy and tyranny in the easternmost parts of Europe. It's a nation that gave up its nuclear weapons at the end of the Cold War, and America made a commitment that said we would assist them with a number of things so that they could still be a secure, sovereign nation. We care about democracy everywhere. They're a huge trading partner for the United States of America. America has a number of interests with respect to Ukraine, and I think the level of resources we've committed there reflects that level of interest.
That was part of Kevin Sterling's exclusive interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And Kevin joins us now from Kingston, Jamaica. So, first of all, well done, Kevin. A timely interview. Let's go back to where you started about Iran and the relations with Iran. It's clear the Secretary is steadfast in saying they cannot get nuclear weapons. He says Europe is there as well, but I don't hear how they're going to keep them from getting them. It doesn't seem to be progress to have them pull out of the JCPOA.
It's absolutely correct, and I was struck by Secretary Pompeo's continued assertions about the growing threat of Hezbollah in Latin America, and that precisely is part of the reason he traveled here and really trying to unify support not just around Venezuela President Juan Guaido, but also against broader national security themes. As it relates to Europe, Secretary Pompeo in the United States also very much trying to firm up strategy with the Europeans to get them on the same page with the United States and to get Iran to somehow negotiate with the United Nations. Now, we should note that within the past 24 hours, Tehran has said that that is something that they are not willing to do, especially should Europe continue to use the United Nations and to continue to try to work with the United Nations to have that go on. I also asked him, of course, about the Senate impeachment trial. He says it has not come up. I can tell you that the impeachment has been on the front pages of virtually every stop along our way on this 5 countries, 5 tour. But he says largely it's business as usual.
Okay, thank you so much. Once again, Kevin Sterling, terrific job. He's in Kingston, Jamaica right now. Coming up, we are just moments away from the start of the opening statements in President Trump's impeachment trial. We're going to be bringing you some of the opening statements on TV and on radio. That's next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Hyundai's premium Genesis marquee is coming after BMW, Porsche, and Lexus with the new SUV. The turbocharged Genesis GV80 will start selling in the U.S. later this year. Luxe features include a 14.5-inch split-screen display and an air purification system. Is your New Year's resolution to eat less carbs? Good luck, especially as Parker House rolls are suddenly everywhere. Warm and buttery, these classic simple white bread loaves, think Pillsbury White, are being embraced by top chefs seeking to elevate humble dishes into fine dining. Newer versions come lard glazed rolls and crackled from an open fire, and even as a bread course on a $260 tasting menu. Spanish winemakers Warren Terrace may cut U.S. sales in half. Almost 90% of vintners surveyed by the Spanish Wine Federation say the tariffs will affect them seriously, given that the U.S. is the biggest export market for 1 in 4 of the country's winemakers. Amanda Rode, Bloomberg Radio.
Financial leaders enjoy talking with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
What was it like having the giant darken the door every once in a while?
Experts appreciate it when what they have to say is understood.
Do you think that we might have seen a cyclical peak in the labour market?
It's the same reason we're recommending Bloomberg Surveillance to you.
Everything you thought would happen is happening.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day, she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/ourstories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. A move higher for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. We've got technology shares rallying on the back of upbeat earnings after the United States and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. Oil is tumbling on concern. The market is oversupplied. NASDAQ Composite Index heading for a record close. S&P 500 Index eking out an advance after France today agreed to delay collecting a tax on multinational digital companies, possibly averting a transatlantic trade war. S&P up 9 now, a gain of 0.3% at 33.29. NASDAQ's up 51 points. That's a gain of 0.6%, while the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 35. For the Dow, that is a gain of just about 0.1%. After earnings, Netflix down 2.3%, Johnson & Johnson down 1.2%. Lingering concerns about Boeing. Member of the Dow, its shares lower now by 2.8%. 10 years up 230 seconds, yield 1.76%. Gold lower, little change, down 12 cents the ounce at $15.58. West Texas Intermediate crude pulling back by 3% now, $56.65 a barrel. Brent crude down 2.4% at $63.01. So again, recapping, a move higher for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. S&P up 8, a gain of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
From our Washington, D.C. Bureau, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. We are waiting right now for the beginning of the Senate trial to resume. They're going to have the opening arguments in a short time. We're waiting for Chief Justice Roberts to step up to the rostrum and sit in his chair, gavel it to order. It should have happened at 1 o'clock, but we will bring that to you as soon as it happens. In the meantime, we're fortunate to have Anna Edgerton here, who basically has been up all night watching this. Anna, thank you so much for joining us. Give us a sense of where we are. As I understand it, no one made any motions. Neither side made motions, which means we're going to start actually with the opening arguments.
That's right. It was a pretty long procedural slog last night until about 2:30 in the morning. So I'm sure everyone is a bit over the procedure and ready to get on with the actual argument. So it changed from what we had initially expected. The House managers will have 3 days to present their arguments. They'll have 24 hours spread out over 3 days, and we do expect that to start today. So they'll have today, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for their arguments, and then we could have a Saturday session for the Trump defense team to begin their arguments.
And as I understand, another change was that the record from the House Judiciary Committee was transferred over. And so as they have these opening statements from the two sides, they can refer, I suppose, in detail to the evidence in the record.
That's right, and it will be printed out for all the senators to have at their desks to be able to consult. So this was an interesting change that happened yesterday during a Republican lunch right before the trial opened. Initially, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had said that the House record wouldn't be introduced into the Senate record because, as a GOP aide put it, it was a sham process in the House, and they didn't think that it was rigorous enough evidence. But there was some pushback from Republicans, and not just the moderates you usually think of, because they want this process to hew very closely to the Clinton precedent, because that's kind of been their defense for the rules the whole time, is that we're just following what was allowed for President Clinton in 1999, and that's the best precedent we have to look to for how this should play out.
So we may have some sense of what the two sides are going to say. There have been briefs that have been submitted. There's been a lot of discussion. We've had even some indication in the procedural discussion yesterday. But one thing that may be interesting, Anna, today is the tone that's being used by the two sides. Because late last night, as I understand it, there was an exchange between Jerry Nadler, who's one of the managers from the House side, and Pat Cipollone, who's the lead lawyer for President Trump, which Chief Justice Roberts actually had to admonish them. As I understand it, Jerry Nadler said that they should be ashamed for participating in a cover-up. And in the meantime, Pat Cipollone came back and said that, in fact, Mr. Nadler is the one who should be ashamed. And the Chief Justice had to remonstrate with him. We can see now, actually, that Chief Justice Roberts has stepped up to the rostrum. He is gaveling the Senate into session. We'll be watching this because we do want to bring you the beginnings of the opening statements as they occur, as they are gathering themselves right now. They're announcing the Chief Justice to the Senate chamber, even as we speak, up on Capitol Hill. And Anna, we will hear first from Adam Schiff, as I understand it, in the opening statements. Is that correct?
Yes, he's been the lead House impeachment manager, and he had an interesting tone yesterday. He was kind of pleading with senators, almost, appealing to their sense of history, to their sense of constitutional duty, and he struck a very humble tone, which was different than what we heard from Nadler. Like you mentioned, Nadler actually accused Pat Cipollone, the lead White House counsel, of being sent to the Senate chamber to lie, which is the point at which Chief Justice John Roberts had to jump in and say, please remember, you're addressing the world's greatest deliberative body, and we call it that because we speak to each other in a civil way. Schiff and the other managers have really tried to remember that they are appealing to senators and that they need at least 4 Republican senators to vote with them if they're going to have any chance to call additional witnesses. So it's very important that they don't alienate the people that are in the chamber with them.
Yeah, just in case we have any doubts about Chief Justice Roberts having done his homework, in that exchange, as I understand it, he referred back to something that happened at the very beginning of the 20th century where a senator was chastised for using the word pettifogging on the floor of the Senate in a trial, an impeachment trial. So we don't want to have any use of words like pettifogging. You have to go back to your dictionary and understand exactly what that means.
Goodness, no.
Yeah. So, but it is an interesting question of what role the Chief Justice plays. It was thought that he might be very quiet. We remember the Chief Justice Rehnquist, when he presided over President Clinton's impeachment trial, really only intervened one time, and I believe it had to do with whether senators could be called jurors. As we're watching this now on a screen, we have Chief Justice Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States, who is sitting down at his seat in front of the full Senate, and they are now actually raising their hands, saluting the flag is what's going on. It may well be a pledge of allegiance to the flag. I'm not sure. Do you know, Anna?
They start with some ceremonial procedures with a prayer from the Senate chaplain, and then they will probably get down to business. Yesterday it started about 1:18 by the time they got through all that.
Which is an interesting point because Chief Justice Roberts is known for how punctual he is. Yesterday, as you said, they did not start at 1. They started at 1:18. Could have been because Senator Schumer, the minority leader, ran it right up just about to 1 o'clock, so there wasn't much time left over. And now we have Chief Justice Roberts addressing the Senate to begin this first full session after the procedural events of yesterday. Let's go now to listen to what's going on in the Senate chamber.
Colleagues, no motions were filed this morning, so we'll proceed to the House Manager's presentation. We will go for approximately 2 hours, then take a short recess when there is an appropriate breakdown between presenters.
Pursuant to the provisions of Senate Resolution 483, the managers for the House of Representatives have 24 hours to make the presentation of their case. The Senate will now hear you.
Mr. Chief Justice, Senators, Counsel for the President, and my fellow House managers, I want to begin by thanking you, Chief Justice, for a very long day, for the way you have presided over these proceedings. And I want to thank the Senators also. We went well into the morning, as you know, until I believe around 2 in the morning. And you paid attention to every word and argument you heard from both sides in this impeachment trial, and I know we are both deeply grateful for that. It was an exhausting day for us, certainly, but we have adrenaline going through our veins, and for those that are required to sit and listen, it is a much more difficult task. And of course, we know our positions. You have the added difficulty of having to weigh the facts and the law. So I want to begin today by thanking you for the conduct of the proceedings yesterday and for inviting your patience as we go forward. We have some very long days yet to come. So let us begin. When a man, unprincipled in private life, desperate in his fortune, bold in his temper, possessed of considerable talents, having the advantage of military habits, despotic in his ordinary demeanor, known to have scoffed in private at the principles of liberty, when such a man is seen to mount the hobby horse of popularity, to join in the cry of danger to liberty, to take every opportunity of embarrassing the general government and bringing it under suspicion, to flatter and fall in with all the nonsense of the zealots of the day, it may justly be suspected that his object is to throw things into confusion, that he might ride the storm and direct the whirlwind. Those words were written by Alexander Hamilton in a letter to President George Washington at the height of the Panic of 1792, a financial credit crisis that shook our young nation. Hamilton was responding to sentiments relayed to Washington as he traveled the country that America, in the face of that crisis, might descend from a Republican form of government, plunging instead into that of monarchy. The framers of the Constitution worried then, as we worry today, that a leader might come to power not to carry out the will of the people that he was elected to represent, but to pursue his own interests. They feared that a president would subvert our democracy by abusing the awesome power of his office for his own personal or political gain. And so they devised a remedy as powerful as the evil it was meant to combat: impeachment. As centuries have passed, our founders have achieved an almost mythical character. We are aware of their flaws, certainly some very painful and pronounced indeed. And yet, when it came to the drafting of a new system of government never seen before and with no guarantee it would succeed, we cannot help but be in awe of their genius, their prescience even, vindicated time and time again. Still, and maybe because of their brilliance and the brilliance of their words, we find year after year it more difficult to imagine them as human beings. This is no less true of Alexander Hamilton, notwithstanding his recent return to celebrity. But they were human beings. They understood human frailties even as they exhibited them. They could appreciate, just as we can, how power can corrupt, and even as we struggle to understand how the framers might have responded to presidential misconduct of the kind and character that we are here to try, we should not imagine for one moment that they lacked basic common sense or refused to apply it ourselves. They knew what it was like to live under a despot, and they risked their lives to be free of it. They knew they were creating an enormously powerful executive, and they knew they needed to constrain it. They did not intend for the power of impeachment to be used frequently or over mere matters of policy, but they put it in the Constitution for a reason. For a man who would subvert the interests of the nation to pursue his own interests. For a man who would seek to perpetuate himself in office by inviting foreign interference and cheating in an election. For a man who would be disdainful of constitutional limit, ignoring or defeating the other branches of government and their co-equal powers. For a man who believed that the Constitution gave him the right to do anything he wanted and practiced in the art of deception. For a man who believed that he was above the law and beholden to no one. For a man, in short, who would be a king. We are here today in this hallowed chamber, undertaking this solemn action for only the third time in history because Donald J. Trump, the 45th President of the United States, has acted precisely as Hamilton and his contemporaries feared. President Trump solicited foreign interference in our democratic elections, abusing the power of his office to seek help from abroad to improve his re-election prospects at home. And when he was caught, he used the powers of that office to obstruct the investigation into his own misconduct. To implement this corrupt scheme, President Trump pressured the president of Ukraine to publicly announce investigations into two discredited allegations that would benefit President Trump's 2020 presidential campaign. When the Ukrainian president did not immediately assent, President Trump withheld two official acts to induce the Ukrainian leader to comply: a head of state meeting in the Oval Office and military funding. Both were of great consequence to Ukraine and to our national interest and security, but one looms largest. President Trump withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid to a strategic partner at war with Russia to secure foreign help with his re-election. In other words, to cheat. In this way, the president used official state powers available only to him and unavailable to any political opponent to advantage himself in a democratic election. His scheme was undertaken for a simple but corrupt reason: to help him win re-election in 2020. But the effect of his scheme was to undermine our free and fair elections and to put our national security at risk. It was not even necessary that Ukraine...
To Representative Adam Schiff. He is the lead House manager, starting the opening statements from the House of Representatives, from the Democrats, laying out why they believe that President Donald John Trump should be convicted and removed from office. We started this with Chief Justice Roberts, really gaveling them in. Adam Schiff then started by thanking the Chief Justice for presiding over this and went out into the early hours of the morning, and also the senators for their patience. He began with some eloquent words from Alexander Hamilton on impeachment, and now he is laying out the case as he sees it for President Trump, going over territory that most of us know about at this point, and this is President Trump's conversations with President Zelensky of Ukraine and the allegation that he withheld military aid from Ukraine that he, in exchange for beginning an investigation into the events surrounding Joe Biden's son's participation in Ukraine. We will continue to monitor this. They are going to go on for 8 hours. They're scheduled for today, another 8 hours tomorrow and the day following, and then the Republicans, President Trump's lawyers, will have their opportunity to present their side of it for, again, 3 successive days of 8 hours each. We'll keep you up to date on any developments as they occur. In the meantime, right now, it's time to go to Charlie Pellet for a business flash.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. We have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. They're all advancing. NASDAQ, in fact, trading at a record. Technology shares are rallying following upbeat earnings. Also, after the U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. NASDAQ Composite Index up by 55 points. Now that's a gain of 0.6%. Should point out that this very young year sees NASDAQ up by 5.1% since the start of the new trading year. S&P higher by 10, up 0.3. The Dow advancing 48 points, up by 0.2%. After After earnings, we have got Netflix down 2.8%, Johnson & Johnson down 0.7%. This headline from the Bloomberg Professional Service: Boris Johnson's Brexit deal passes through the UK Parliament. 10-year up 230 seconds at yield 1.76%. Gold down 36 cents the ounce at $15.57. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.5%, $56.93 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much to Charlie Pellet. We're coming for our bureau in Washington, D.C. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. I am David Weston. We're down here to cover the impeachment trial of President Trump. But at the same time, there's a lot of other news going on, including from President Trump himself this morning talking about trade. We have with us Rufus Yerkes. He's National Foreign Trade Council President. In the first hour of Balance of Power, we talked about some of what President Trump had to say about the WTO, the World Trade Organization. But there's a lot more going on with trade. We had, Rufus, some IMF numbers come out earlier this week, which took down global growth somewhat, but they said maybe the diminution in the rate of growth in world trade may have flattened out. It may come back up in 2020. Is that how you see it? Is trade coming back globally?
Well, I'm not an economist, so I can't really second guess the IMF, but I think all the indications are that, there's going to be slightly better trade growth in 2020. But that's from a pretty bad year. 2019 was a pretty bad year, and the growth is not a spectacular increase. I think the bigger question, David, is what's the impact of all of this, the long-term effects of the trade war and the tariffs and other things on U.S. exports, U.S. manufacturing. There's certainly some numbers that have come out recently that shows that manufacturing index has declined in the U.S. It's at the lowest point it's been, I think, since 2008. And there's quite a bit of an indication of a downturn in sectors like the transport sector, which is heavily dependent on trade. So I'm still worried about the impact and overhang of all of this trade stuff on the U.S. economy. Of course, when you do global trade growth, you're talking about a lot of different countries. And one of the things the IMF talks about is the fact that China's trade numbers are expected to come back strongly in 2020.
Is there China help on the way even for manufacturing? Because as we looked at the numbers supposedly that have been committed to in that phase one, agriculture is something we've heard about a lot, but there was a fair amount of machinery as well in there that surprised me at least. It looks like China's committing to buy a lot of machinery from us.
So the big question overhanging this whole China deal is how is China going to perform on these commitments, and what can the U.S. do about it if they don't? The numbers that are in the agreement are, of course, spectacular. It's a little hard to believe, frankly, that we're going to see a $200 billion increase in exports to China. The Chinese have said, at the same time that they've signed this deal, they've said that deal is dependent on market conditions. They also are saying it has to be consistent with WTO. You see a number of other countries already suggesting that if there's a special arrangement with the U.S. to give preferential treatment to U.S. exports, that'll become an issue with all the other WTO countries, Brazil, Japan, Europe. And so, it's not clear to me that we're going to see this kind of spectacular increase. And one other point, David. What can President Trump do to enforce what is essentially a state-to-state? This is the kind of agreement that, the Soviet Union used to make with its Eastern European satellites. You'll export this much and import that much. But, the president doesn't have power to force U.S. companies to export a certain amount. It depends on whether or not they have the capacity and they can compete on a price basis with others. So there's a lot of issues about these China exports that, this deal doesn't really resolve.
So Rufus, you have so much experience in this, both as Deputy Director General of the WTO as well as Deputy U.S. Trade Representative at one point. Is there something of an innovation, if I can call it that, in what President Trump has done in this phase one deal? In this sense, I think often in trade deals, if there's an accusation of somebody breaching it, you sort of go to an arbitration and resolve it. In this instance, it appears that both U.S. and China, I should say, have the right to judge for themselves for this violation and automatically reimpose tariffs. Is that different from what we normally see? And might it put more teeth into the deal as far as China is concerned?
Well, it is different than most other free trade agreements. The thing that worries me about that is it basically leads each side to unilaterally judge whether or not there has been performance. And we don't know on what basis those will be made. And from a business point of view, that means you have complete uncertainty as to whether or not the deal is going to stick, because either side can pull out of it at any time. The other problem with this deal, David, is look, it's left tariffs on more than $250 billion of imports into the U.S. Many of those are products that U.S. manufacturers buy as part of their supply chain. So that tariff overhang is still there. And there's nothing in the deal that obligates the Chinese to remove the retaliatory tariffs that they imposed. So it's an odd sort of deal. We're going to increase all this trade dramatically, but we're going to keep high tariffs. That seems to me to be contradictory.
Just to add one more element to this, I referred earlier to President Trump's news conference today. He didn't just talk about the WTO. He talked about Europe a fair amount and how he's really going to be focused on Europe right now. Could we take away with the one hand what we're giving with the other as far as Europe actually getting into more of a trade spat with Europe?
I'm extremely worried about the increasing tensions between the U.S. and Europe. Look, this is the largest bilateral trade and investment relationship in the world by far. U.S. companies are heavily invested in Europe and vice versa. We have really major trade across a huge wide spectrum of goods and services and everything else. And the other thing is, historically, it was the U.S. and the Europeans who helped to develop the market-oriented rules of the WTO, and we need that alliance to be strong and robust in order to create a common front to push the Chinese in the right direction. I can't think of any time in our trade history where we've needed more cooperation between the U.S. and Europe about what the principles of the system should be. Because if we can't get the world's second largest economy to comply with those principles because we're fighting with each other, that's going to really drag down not only the WTO, but the whole international trading system.
We have a new president of the European Commission coming over, Ursula von der Leyen, from Germany to meet with President Trump, I guess, in 2 weeks or so. Do you have high hopes for that?
I think so far what I've seen from her is promising. She made a statement, I think, today or yesterday, in which she suggested that there is scope for a good trade deal between the U.S. and Europe that would cover, industry and services and even agriculture. The new commissioner for trade, Hogan, came over here and he talked about
might get included
food safety.
That might get something done.
Might get something done.
Yeah, thanks very much to the National Foreign Trade Council President Rufus Yerxa. So Secretary Mike Pompeo is traveling on Latin America, and our very own Chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli caught up with him for an exclusive interview. That's coming up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Tech shares are rallying on the back of upbeat earnings, and after the U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. But oil is declining on concerns the market is oversupplied. The Dow is up 40 points, S&P up 9, the Nasdaq climbing 50 points. Tesla's market value has climbed past $100 billion, topping Volkswagen for the first time ever. Netflix is facing the toughest year in its history in terms of new streaming competition, but the company says it's ready. Netflix is working to keep customers loyal with a flood of new shows and movies. And a new report suggests a majority of Americans are just one unexpected bill away from financial hardship. BakeRate.com says only 41% of adults have enough money saved to cover a $1,000 emergency. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast.
How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team?
Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested in
Keys. Check. Phone. Check.
70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Having to deal with financial stuff can make you feel... But at Money Supermarket, we make you feel... That's because we go further to help you get money car. We don't just compare. We cut prices to help you get better car insurance deals. Get money car. Money Supermarket.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down. Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on a Latin American tour, and he spoke exclusively with our colleague Kevin Cirilli. We'll bring you that interview, but first, here's Charlie Pellet with a market check.
Hi, thank you very much, and here's what's going on. We have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing right now. S&P pushing higher by 10, up 0.3%. The Dow up 74, up 0.3, and technology shares rallying after upbeat earnings. Also after the U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. NASDAQ at a record up 52, now a gain of 0.6%. Sales of previously owned homes put in the strongest performance in almost 2 decades. That story from Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Historically low mortgage rates are luring buyers. December sales advanced at the fastest pace since February 2018. That's just housing will support growth for the second quarter in a row and cushion the economy from subdued business investment. Case in point, housing starts advanced to a 13-year high in December. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
The 10-year up 230 seconds, yield 1.76%. Gold down 90 cents the ounce at $15.57, down less than 0.1%. Big move for crude oil. West Texas Intermediate down 2.4%, $57.01 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues, the Wednesday edition. Once again, here he is, your host, David Weston.
Thanks so much to Charlie Pellet. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on a trip to Latin America, addressing concerns ranging from terrorist infiltration in the southern hemisphere to continuing concerns with Iran. Our chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli, caught up with the Secretary of State in Jamaica, Kingston, Jamaica, and for an exclusive interview, and here is his interview.
You were recently traveling in Colombia and you met with Venezuela President Juan Guaido, who's risking his life to meet with world leaders, including yourself, who'll be headed to Davos. Are you hopeful that these world meetings will shift the momentum and continue the momentum against the Maduro regime?
You know I am. When I had a chance to meet with him, he is a brave man. He's also a good leader who cares deeply about the Venezuelan people, the same interest that the United States has. And so I do hope as he meets with European leaders when he travels to Davos, they too will see that this is a worthy and noble goal that we're engaged in, restoring democracy. The humanitarian calamity that is Venezuela now, some 6 million people by the end of this year will have fled the country, in a country the size of 30 million or so 20% of the population. This is a staggering humanitarian crisis, one the United States wants to do its best to resolve in a way that can only happen when there are free, fair, democratic elections that lead to the people's choice to be the leader of that country.
In Colombia, President Duque at the conference cautioned against the threat of Hezbollah in the region. And you yourself, sir, said that Hezbollah has, quote, found a home in Venezuela. How significant of a role does Hezbollah play in the region?
Yeah, too much. And I mentioned it in Venezuela, but in the tri-border area in Brazil, this is again an area where Iranian influence, we talk about them as the world's largest state sponsor of terror. We do that intentionally. It's the world's largest. It's not just a Middle East phenomenon. So while when folks think of Hezbollah, they typically think of Syria and Lebanon. But Hezbollah has now put down roots throughout the globe and in South America. And it's great to see now multiple countries now having designated Hezbollah as a terrorist organization. It means we can work together to stamp out the security threat in the region.
I'm struck by this because even hearing what you're saying right now, I mean, to take a step back, an Iranian-backed terrorist organization has found a home in America's backyard.
It's something we've been talking about for some time. When you see the scope and reach of what the Islamic Republic of Iran regime has done, can't forget they tried to kill someone in the United States of America. They've conducted assassination campaigns in Europe. This is a global phenomenon. When we say that Iran is the leading destabilizing force in the Middle East and throughout the world, it's because of this terror activity that they have now spread as a cancer all across the globe.
This past week, as you've traveled the world, we started in Germany and Berlin, where you met with world leaders, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. I'm sure you talked about Iran, but as you know, Europe has not always followed the same strategic route as the United States when it comes to Iran. Did your meetings with European leaders move the needle in that direction at all?
Yes, sir. Look, we've been clear. We've had a different view on the right way to proceed to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, that their missile program is contained, and that this terror regime we were just talking about is pushed back. They've never wavered from the shared objective. They just had a different view about how to proceed. But if you've seen what Iran has done even in the past few weeks, right, that's nuclear extortion. They're now threatening to leave the NPT. So I did. I talked with my European counterparts while I was there. They have now taken a step under the JCPOA to invoke the dispute resolution mechanism. I think not only they, but the world can now see that this rogue regime has no intention of complying with the central tenets of what that agreement contained, and the world must unite to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. I saw President Macron say that yesterday. I know he means it now. We need to work together to achieve it.
So when you say they have no intention, then how do you get Tehran to go to the United Nations, to come to the United Nations, to work with the international community aside from the sanctions and the various military response options?
Ultimately, the people of Iran will get what they so richly deserve, a regime that behaves in ways that are consistent with the value sets of the Iranian people. In the end, the Iranian people will demand their government. You see it. You see it in the protests. You see it when they walk around American flags that were put down by the Islamic Republic's leadership in an attempt to show they could show pictures of Iranian people walking over American flags. And in fact, people go out of their way not to do that. This isn't about Iran versus the United States. This is about a regime that has treated its own people terribly. The world can see it. It's a regime that even now the IAEA is trying to figure out how nuclear material got to places that the Iranian leadership said it would not be. And so this is a global risk. President Trump started his remarks the night after an American response by saying Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. It is our primary purpose. but we have a broader set of objectives too. We just want them to behave like a normal nation and re-enter the society, the community of nations.
And traveling with you all week, I mean, I'm struck by just the range of the hotspot issues around the world that are going on. And back home, the only thing that they're talking about is impeachment and the Senate impeachment trial. Did that come up at all in your conversations with world leaders? And has the Senate impeachment trial endangered U.S. interests and reputation around the world?
You know, Kevin, it hasn't come up today, except where I received a question at a press conference about it, so it came up.
And you said you would testify.
I've said consistently, if the law required me to testify, I would do so. You know, it hasn't come up. It almost never comes up in meetings with my counterparts. There's too many important things going on in the world. America is too close a partner to have with countries in the Caribbean region here in Kingston. They care about so much that we do. They're such good friends and allies. They see the noise in Washington, but it is not something they would think in the time that we have between us that they would raise.
And House Democrats are saying that Rudy Giuliani orchestrated a shadow foreign policy. And can you assure diplomats serving overseas all around the world in dangerous places that that's not the case?
Yeah, the foreign policy we were executing then is the same foreign policy we're executing today with respect to Ukraine. It's an important country. It sits at this crossroads. It's under enormous pressure from Russia. President Trump has taken actions to counter Russia that President Obama refused to take. We've provided defensive systems for the Ukrainian people so that they can defend themselves. We've supported this new leader, President Zelensky, in his efforts to stamp out corruption and to build his democracy. We're continuing to do that. Our policy with respect to Ukraine has been set on the fundamental principles of reducing the footprint of corruption and helping the Ukrainian people build up a democracy while under threat from the Russians in the east and southeast.
You've said that you look forward to going there, that you have other issues that you want to discuss with them. Or is that still the case?
Yeah, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there before too long. I had a trip planned, and then we had an issue arise in the Middle East that I had to attend to. While that issue is not behind us, there's still a lot of work to do there. I'll get to Ukraine before too long.
To take a step back, why should Americans care about what happens in the Ukraine? What's the broader theme here? Who's explaining to the American people why U.S.-Ukraine policy matters to the average American?
Yeah. So Ukraine sits at the edge between democracy and tyranny in the easternmost parts of Europe. It's a nation that gave up its nuclear weapons at the end of the Cold War, and America made a commitment that said we would assist them with a number of things so that they could still be a secure, sovereign nation. We care about democracy everywhere. They're a huge trading partner for the United States of America. America has a number of interests with respect to Ukraine, and I think the level of resources we've committed there reflects that level of interest.
And likewise, in contrast to Russia, you look at the situation with China. You were in Silicon Valley, I believe, the other week. Before
a couple weeks back now.
Before embarking on this trip, and all throughout this region, I've seen Huawei buildings, I've seen Huawei phones, and what's your message? How do you convince our allies in this region and all throughout the region to not go that route?
You know, there's not much convincing that needs to be done about the threat from the Chinese Communist Party. They all understand it. Our task is to make sure that the risks are known to these leaders. I talked about it with each leader here that I've met with today, ranging from Haiti and the Dominican Republic and Jamaica.
Are they listening? They're not going to use Huawei?
They're trying to work their way through a set of complex commercial national security challenges that they face. And what I want them to know is the United States stands ready to support them, and we want to make sure that they understand the risk. If you put this technology into your system, you risk exposing the people of your country to having their information, their health information, their private information, their financial information exposed to the Chinese Communist Party. It's a risk that they've all taken on board. We're working to make sure that they're as secure as they can be, and then we are in turn working to make sure that American information that might flow across those networks protects the American people's privacy.
All right, just a couple of final questions. The situation in Lebanon, they've had their cabinet, and they've got Hezbollah connections. Is the U.S. going to work with this new cabinet?
We'll have to take a look at it. I don't know the answer to that yet. I saw what happened over the last 24 hours. We've been very clear about the requirements for the United States to engage. Lebanon has a terrible financial crisis that lays in front of it in just the weeks ahead, we're prepared to engage and provide support, but only to a government that is committed to reform. That's important for America, but if you look at the protests that are taking place in Beirut and cities outside of Beirut, you can see, just like in Baghdad, go look at the protests in Baghdad. These aren't anti-American protests. These are protests demanding sovereignty and freedom. The protests taking place today in Lebanon are saying to Hezbollah, no mas, no more. We want a non-corrupt government that reflects the will of the people of Lebanon. If this government is responsive to that and this new set of leaders is prepared to make those commitments and deliver on that, that's the kind of government that we'll support around the world and the kind of government we would support in Lebanon.
That was Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli in his exclusive interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. In the meantime, opening statements are continuing in the trial of President Trump up in the Senate. Here for an update is Bloomberg Government's Emily Wilkins. She comes to us from Capitol Hill. So, Emily, we saw the first few minutes of Mr. Schiff's opening statement. What is happening now?
So Schiff is going to continue giving his open statement. Remember, this is the first day of 3 days that House impeachment managers have. They've got 24 hours to make their argument, and we're expecting them to use much of that time. After that, they will do 16. The White House defense will go ahead and make their argument, and then senators will have the ability to ask questions. And then we're going to get to the question of whether or not we're going to see witnesses in this trial.
What is the goal, if you're Adam Schiff right now, or for that many, any of the House managers? We've heard time and time again that basically there aren't two-thirds of the senators who are willing to vote against President Trump. At the same time, is the goal here really just to persuade 4 senators that we need more evidence, whether it's documentary or testimonial?
You know, Schiff said earlier today that he sees this as going to 2 audiences. Number one, the senators, of course, but the other so the American people, that he wants to really make this case to the American people that what President Trump did is not only wrong, but is an impeachable offense. Because and at this point it does look like Donald Trump is acquitted, then he will be facing most likely a November 2020 election, and Americans will need to decide whether or not they believe that he should continue being president.
So, Emily, you're not one of the House managers, so it's unfair to ask you. But at this point, is there anything left for the American people to hear they haven't heard already? They've heard a fair amount about this. They seem to have decided views. They seem to be relatively split on the question, certainly not 2/3 in favor of removing the president. So what new would come up that would have the American people say, oh, now I see, I have a different view?
Sure. And as far as like actual new things, I don't think there might be a ton. I mean, we have seen some new information, new text messages, new documents come out. But what struck me yesterday, I was sitting in the Senate chamber and just listening to the House managers and the defense make their case. And it has been a little bit rare to have one person to sort of talk for a prolonged period of time, really putting all the pieces together. Remember, most of the public process at this point has been the hearings, and those were, questions back and forth, this very partisan atmosphere. Now this is the scene that it's the spark notes in a way of this entire impeachment trial, although I don't think 24 hours is very spark note-esque. But you're just seeing the summary and the argument sort of made crystallized after this month-long process.
Okay, Emily, thank you for your continued great reporting from Capitol Hill. That's Bloomberg Government's Emily Wilkins. And it's time now for a business flash. And for that, we turn, of course, to Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Developing story out of China, David, specifically Wuhan, China. Another drastic measure to curb that illness outbreak. China's CCTV reporting that Wuhan, the city of Wuhan, has now suspended all outbound flights and rail services. It is the latest step in China as the nation moves to contain the spread of a deadly virus that has rattled international markets. U.S. stocks are rebounding today with the S&P 500 index climbing 10 points, close to a record, up 0.3%. Right now, NASDAQ is at a record, up 53, a gain of 0.6%. The Dow higher by 83 points, up now by just about 0.3%. 10 years up 3/32, that yield 1.76%. Gold down 0.1%, $15.57 the ounce, and West Texas U.S. Intermediate crude down 2.5%, $56.93 a barrel. After earnings, Netflix down 3.3%, Johnson & Johnson down 0.3%, another down day for Boeing, dropping 0.7%. Recapping, S&P up 10, a gain of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Balance of Power continues, and once again, here's David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet, live from our bureau in Washington. This is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. President Trump is on his way back from Europe, but not before saying there's a lot of work to be done on U.S.-European relations. Lord Mark Malloch Brown has had a remarkable career in public service, serving in senior positions at the World Bank as Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, and then as Minister of State in the Foreign Office of Prime Minister Gordon Brown. He is now with Eurasia Group, and he joins us now. Welcome, Lord Brown. It's really great to have you with us. Give us a sense of U.S.-European relations right now, because this has been a focal point because of Davos, which you've been to more than once, I know. It's a focal point. But what is the state of U.S.-European relations, would you say?
Well, it's a little troubled, and that won't come as a surprise to your listeners. There's the trade issue, which still remains difficult, with a technology tax threatened by the Brits and others, which is complicating the trade relationship. But beyond that, there's real difficulties in the security relationship, where Europe's beginning to think of a Europe without the U.S. protective umbrella. And so, it's a troubled moment. That said, I really don't think there's anyone in Europe who doubts that the transatlantic relationship is the core foreign policy relationship, not just for the UK, but for Europe as a whole.
So as a Briton, but also as a European, can you summarize how you think Europeans, and particularly European authorities, regard President Trump at the moment? Obviously, people didn't really know him, I don't think, very well when he came to office. He doesn't handle things the way I typically think of diplomats as handling things. At the same time, is there a sort of a sense that he's rough and ready? He's getting things done, for example, like the China trade deal and like the USMCA, that successor to NAFTA. It might not be always pretty or elegant, but he sort of gets the job done.
Look, I think people will acknowledge he is getting some stuff done, and I think the smarter Europeans respect some of the disruptive impact that he has. They recognize that, for example, Europe was really not carrying its weight in terms of its contribution to NATO. So some messages, which are a continuation of those delivered by the Obama administration before, but delivered much more robustly and occasionally undiplomatically, I think there is respect for. But I think what the Europeans struggle with is the sort of unpredictability of the Trump administration, the fact that decisions seem so centered on the president himself, but in terms of his own personality and the lack of institutional constraints around him or wise voices around him, European leaders just find that a very uncomfortable situation. And because they recognize that there is a long-term rebalancing of the U.S. from Europe towards its Asian responsibilities, I think the acceleration of that under Trump worries Europeans.
Lord Brown, talk about one specific issue that very much involves Europe, and by that I certainly include the United Kingdom, and that is relations with Iran and its development of nuclear weapons, because to some extent it looks to us like Europe is almost caught in between Iran on the one hand and the U.S. on the other hand. We've just heard from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that we are all agreed, including the Europeans, that we have to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons. What is Europe's position on this? What is the way to get that done? Withdrawing from JCPOA, is that the way to get it done?
Well, it's not what the Europeans want, but they're recognizing that the game is changing, that the goalposts have moved by the actions that President Trump has taken, and it's one where they recognize how difficult it was to get the JCPOA done. It came after years of conflict. There was a recognition at the time that just doing something limited around the nuclear weapons issue was the way forward, and let's deal with broader issues of the relationship between Iran and Europe and Iran and the U.S. later. That whole process was thrown on its head by President Trump, and Europeans with that historical memory think it's very unlikely that it'll be easier to do a broader agreement. But nor do they want to leave themselves in a position where they seem to be protecting Iran from the errors of its ways and somehow a buffer between it and the US. So they're very uncomfortable with this. They don't agree with the direction of American diplomacy, but nor do they want to desert the US on this one.
Lord Brown, let's come back to your home country of the United Kingdom. Brexit passed today, as I understand it, Parliament. After all the falderall for over 3 years, it seems to have been almost lost in the rounding between an impeachment trial here and a Wuhan virus and Davos and things like that. What is next in Brexit? I mean, where does that take the United Kingdom? Where does it take it in relationships with Europe and, for that matter, the rest of the world?
Well, let's be clear. The next reading passed. It's still not quite a done deal yet, but it's almost as good as done. It'll be done, by the end of the month, and there will be quite a brouhaha with some ceremonies and celebrations by the government on the 31st of the month. But why, in a sense, has the sort of pain and grief gone out of it? Because, in a sense, this result was discounted by markets and by political observers once Boris Johnson was returned with a thumping majority at the election in early December. And, I think many of us feel, even if we didn't like the result, that it was a return to the legitimacy of parliamentary government. We'd all been quite uncomfortable with this fact that thing was initially put to a referendum, and then there was talk, which I supported the lack of a good alternative, of a second referendum. But for a country which is, the inventor of parliamentary democracy, this was an uncomfortable way to go. And the fact that there was an election, that the government won on its proposition of getting Britain out of Europe by the end of January, I think the country's ready to respect that result.
You have negotiated any number of complicated, difficult international relations. Does the UK have the firepower, as it were, to negotiate all of the arrangements it needs to by the end of this year?
No, it doesn't. And, I think in that sense, the claim that Brexit's over on the 31st is a claim that many will come to revisit, because there are going to be agonizing trade negotiations running for a long while to come. The government has said that the main one with Europe has to be concluded by the end of calendar 2020. Right. And they very much hope to get the US one done before the presidential election in November. But in truth, there just isn't, as you say, the firepower, the expertise. We've deferred trade negotiations to Brussels. And in fact, when it comes to firepower, Europe, as a much bigger market, is able to command a lot more concessions from trade partners than Britain alone. So there is neither the expertise or the weaponry to get the trade agreements that the government hopes for.
A good long way to go. Okay, thank you very much. It was a delight to have you with us. That is Lord Mark Malloch Brown of the Eurasia Group. And now it's time to find out from Jason Kelly what's going up next on Bloomberg Business Week. There's hardly any news today, Jason.
No news. Certainly nothing going on. I don't even know why you're in Washington. Nothing's happening down there, David. We're going to keep a close eye on what's going on just a few blocks from where you are. We're going to hear from Kevin Cirilli. He spoke with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, as you know. Also, the cover story this week, you're going to want to read it. It's all about Tesla and Elon Musk defying all those shorts and all those Twitter haters.
Some people must have lost some money in all those shorts. It was
billions,
so shorted.
Billions and billions have lost. Amazing.
All to look forward to in the 4 hours of Bloomberg Business Week coming up next with Jason Kelly and Carol Massar. That does it for Balance of Power from Washington today. I'm David Weston, and thank you so much for listening to Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Look at that. A riveting quest. A glorious opportunity. A scratch card. Yet he remains unfazed by the challenge, wavering at nothing.
Miss, please keep it down. We're in the quiet area.
Sorry. Here we are. The moment of truth. As he reaches...
Instant excitement with scratch cards from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Do you do the same thing every weekend? You know, meet up with the same friends for brunch, browse around the same shops, eat the same Saturday night takeaway. Mine's a lamb balti with mushroom pilau rice. Snuggle up next to the same person and watch the same brain-numbing reality TV. Then maybe it's time to switch it up. Starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa, with its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Along the goal line, scores and tucks it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. 4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, also streaming on YouTube. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2020. Carol Massar, along with my co-host Jason Kelly. Tech and Tesla.
A little bit of tech, a little bit of Tesla driving the markets higher. Tech leading the way in a lot of ways, although pretty broad gains, it feels like, across the major indices. And Tesla, man.
Hitting a big milestone.
Up and up and up.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a moment. First up, let's get to your top business stories at this hour. Here is Charlie Bell.
Hi, thank you very much indeed. We are looking at records right now for both the S&P and NASDAQ. We've got the Dow higher as well. Stocks are moving higher on the back of upbeat earnings. Also after the U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. Oil tumbling on concern. The market is oversupplied. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.4%, $56.98 a barrel, down now by $1.40. Brent crude down 1.9%, $63.39. We've got gold also lower by 0.1%, $15.57 the ounce, and the 10-year up 2/30 seconds. The yield on the 10-year now 1.76%. So again, an update here with the S&P 500 index advancing 8 points. That's a gain of 0.3%. The Dow up 57 points, up by 0.2%. NASDAQ at a record up 43, a gain right now of 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, a Wednesday edition. I think we're going to get today's day right. The whole show.
I know.
That's a goal.
I'm finally there. It is Wednesday, everyone. Check your calendar. It's also Wednesday in Davos, although it's a little bit later. It's in the evening.
They're at the bar now.
They are at the bar. But earlier, our team on the ground caught up with the CEO of Morgan Stanley, James Gorman. We had a great conversation with him back at the Columbia Business School last year. So looking forward to what he had to say about many things, including the Fed.
Well, and speaking of people with interesting things to say, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, caught up with Kevin Cirilli. We're going to hear that interview in just a few minutes, and then we're going to round out the show. If you don't know this company, but you've ever worked out just about anywhere at any boutique fitness studio, you have used it. MindBody, it's underneath basically the entire fitness industry. The CEO is going to be along.
Talk about the platform.
The platform underneath it all.
So the CEO is going to be here. And what I think is going to be a year that's all about the fitness world again.
All right. This portion of Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Let's set the Business Week agenda.
Let's do it. Vildana Hyrick is with us, cross-asset reporter at Bloomberg News. She's in our interactive broker studio, along with the one and only Dave, wearing a Davos tie. Very nicely done. Charlie Pellet, check it out. I mean, it's ties, flags from around the world. Dave Wilson is our stocks editor here at Bloomberg News. Vildana, I don't know if you know about Dave, but he's got quite the wardrobe when it comes to ties.
I don't have any Davos ties, I'm sorry.
Oh, boy.
We'll have to work on that. All right. Dave, let's set the tone here. So we talked about Tesla. Don't give it away, but did hit a milestone. But in general, we're seeing tech kind of give some momentum back to the market here again.
Right. Of course, we have to remember Tesla is an automaker at the end of the day, but that's a whole nother story. I mean, you see IBM shares up more than 3% after their results came out late yesterday. And it's interesting to see chip makers who are about to report move higher in advance of their results. Texas Instruments, due after the close of trading today, that stock is up more than 2%. And Intel, which at least tentatively their results are due out tomorrow, and the share is higher by about 2.8%. So, that kind of underlying strength kind of helping things along, no question. And, beyond that, I mean, it's kind of a continuation of what we see. Not a whole lot of movement necessarily from one day to the next, but in the end, shares moving higher. The S&P 500 set up for another record.
I feel like that's been a big story, certainly of the market trade over the last year, that we just continue to grind a little bit higher.
Up and up and up. All right, so Vildana, back on the desk. Your cross-asset team, what are they talking about? Like, what's the thing that investors need to know from your estimation?
A lot of people I spoke with today and that some of my colleagues have spoken with are saying that the fears over the virus spreading are actually receding a bit today, which is why we see stocks up. And that's mainly because we're actually seeing the U.S. take some steps to sort of, screen people at airports, in Atlanta and Chicago. But also we're seeing China take some additional steps in terms of some of the screenings or even shutting down some of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, you can't leave the city where this all started at this point, Juan. Yeah.
But U.S. investors are seeing that as a sign that actually people care about this, that nobody is just sort of letting it go.
That's interesting.
They're taking it very seriously, which is why we're seeing stocks up today.
Well, and it is interesting to think back historically. I mean, the equivalent I think that people are using is SARS, right? And it felt like that got well ahead of this before everybody essentially pulled a Carol like WOA, like let's pull back.
Slow down. Well, no, but I think it's a good point that everybody quickly moved to action to contain it and really get their hands on it. And I think that, really appeased investors, I think. And that's why you're seeing it kind of calm down.
And we do know investors care about this, just looking at the best gauge we have, which is most read, one of the most read headlines at this point or stories is exactly what we're talking about. Travel from Chinese city at the center of the virus outbreak is halted because we did have a U.S. case, we had a Hong Kong case, and the WHO going to figure out whether this is a public health emergency.
Did you say WTO?
WHO.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Did I say WTO?
No, you did not, Jason. You got it right.
But I have WTO on the mind because I think it's interesting. I was listening to President Trump earlier this morning in a press conference and talking about, maybe working or opening up a conversation with the WTO again, which I thought was fascinating.
That's why you have it on your mind, Carol. There you go.
Because I thought, wait a minute, am I hearing this right? Isn't this the organization that he has totally, been disparaging about?
Because that's a multilateral organization. We live in a bilateral world.
Exactly. So what's the one thing that you think folks need to know about, Jason?
I've had a lot of Davos on the mind, just sort of seeing what people are doing. Although the other thing, and this is Davos related, is all this talk, and I wonder, Vildana, if you're hearing this as well, this talk about climate. It's been number one on the agenda. Yep. Certainly, yesterday we had sort of President Trump and Greta Thunberg on two sides of this issue. But also there's a great story. The most read story in the Bloomberg right now is about the world's most profitable hedge fund is now a climate radical. I mean, is this something that people talk about to you, investing here?
Definitely. Especially in terms of the ESG space and some of the ETFs that you can invest in. They're becoming more popular. Everybody's talking about this. And of course, we had the Microsoft news from last week where they're looking to mitigate some of the carbon footprint that the company is putting out there. So it's definitely on top of people's minds.
We're going to be at the Power Players Summit in Miami. Shameless tease right now, but we're going to be talking about the Super Bowl, but a Power Players Summit, and we're going to be sitting down with some folks like the CEO of PepsiCo Beverages. And what's interesting is sustainability, the 49ers, their stadium, like sustainability and thinking about climate and the climate change story, if you will, has become front and center for them as well in sports.
And this feels like something that is catching more attention across equities, right, Dave? Or do I have that wrong?
I mean, it is to the extent that it's a topic for discussion. Right. Now, how that plays out in terms of stocks, you kind of need to drill down to get a better sense of it. You know, you think about, let's say, a company like First Solar, biggest maker of solar cells. And really, I mean, the stock's kind of taken a hit lately. So it's not like what people are talking about has necessarily translated into investment strategy, other than, what's going on with the energy stocks. I mean, that's sort of an obvious example. Companies, pursuing their business and investors backing away. It's like they don't want to get stuck in that climate shift.
I will say First Solar was up almost 32% last year, so it had quite a run. Yeah. I just want to say one thing that caught my attention. Bridgewater's CIO, Bob Prince, saying the boom bust cycle is over, talks about central bank intervention. And so, smooth sailing to some extent, that maybe we are living, things are different.
Oh, boy. That's always dangerous.
2020.
Exactly. 2020. It's all new. It's all different. All right. Vildana Heinrich, thank you so much. Cross-asset reporter for Bloomberg. Dave Wilson, you'll be back in a bit with your chart and stock of the day. All right. It's the Bloomberg Business Week Bite of the Day. We've been leading up to this. It's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, Carol, $100 billion.
It's all about Tesla's market value. It has climbed above Volkswagen's for the first time to more than $100 billion. That's a threshold that will trigger a huge payout for Elon Musk if he can sustain the feat for months. The electric car maker's shares soaring as much as almost 6% in early trading today. But anyway, this has been a benchmark we've been talking about, and here you have it. Bigger than VW. That's tremendous.
$100 billion. All right. Bob Moon is here. He's got your world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, Carol, thank you. Emotions and tempers are running high on Capitol Hill as members of the House, acting as prosecutors, make their case to senators for removing President Trump from office. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham delivered an impassioned defense of Trump ahead of today's proceedings.
They're on a crusade to destroy this man, and they don't care what they destroy in the process of trying to destroy Donald Trump.
The formal arguments are underway on the Senate floor, and Bloomberg's Irv Chapman is following them for us. He's live on Capitol Hill now. Irv.
Bob, Chairman Adam Schiff told senators he and his team will lay out in detail the graphic testimony of State Department and National Security Council witnesses who described the president's decision-making on Ukraine.
President Trump withheld hundreds of millions of dollars in military aid to a strategic partner at war with Russia to secure foreign help with his reelection. In other words, to cheat. But the effect of his scheme was to undermine our free and fair elections and to put our national security at risk.
Before the Senate convened, Schiff said there would be no deal with Republicans on witnesses for both sides. No fantasy football trade, as he put it. Bob?
Irv Chapman live on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Airlines have been complaining that some passengers are abusing the rules to bring almost any kind of animal into the passenger cabin with them for emotional support. Today, the Transportation Department announced plans to change the rules regarding service animals. Only dogs would qualify. The days of bringing rabbits, birds, and even turtles on planes for emotional support could be ending. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
What do you count? Interest rates?
If you get marginally higher interest rates, does that bring the PE multiple in?
Trade figures?
China driving a tectonic shift in the availability of money.
Employment data?
What is happening with the headcount?
You could just leave all that to us.
Is it a one-and-done tariff adjustment?
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell. Right where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now, there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery. Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem. And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
On the goal line, scores! It takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
The move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
10 years ago, the book The New Jim Crow helped ignite a movement against mass incarceration. This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with the author, Michelle Alexander.
Millions of people have been relegated to a permanent second-class status. It wasn't a message people were eager to hear, but I think it is today easier to see.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing right now. In fact, NASDAQ trading at a record. Technology shares rallying, following upbeat earnings. Also after the U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation. S&P up 8. That's a gain of 0.3%. We've got the Dow up 44 points, higher now by 0.2%. And the NASDAQ Composite Index up 44 points. That is a gain of just about 0.5%. 10-year up 2/32, yield 1.76%. Gold, little change, down less than 0.1%, now down 76 the ounce at $15.57. And West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.8%, $56.74 a barrel. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Well, Bloomberg Chief Washington Correspondent Kevin Cirilli, host, I should say, of Bloomberg Sound On, has been traveling with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Kevin spoke to the Secretary in an exclusive interview from Jamaica. Kevin started by asking the Secretary about Iran-backed Hezbollah finding a foothold in South America.
When you see the scope and reach of what the Islamic Republic of Iran regime has done, can't forget they tried to kill someone in the United States of America. They've conducted assassination campaigns in Europe. This is a global phenomenon. When we say that Iran is the leading destabilizing force in the Middle East and throughout the world, it's because of this terror activity that they have now spread as a cancer all across the globe.
This past week, as you've traveled the world, we started in Germany and Berlin, where you met with world leaders, including German Chancellor Angela Merkel. I'm sure you talked about Iran, but as you know, Europe has not always followed the same strategic route as the United States when it comes to Iran. Did your meetings with European leaders move the needle in that direction at all?
Yes, sir. Look, we've been clear. We've had a different view on the right way to proceed to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon, that their missile program is contained, and that this terror regime we were just talking about is pushed back. They've never wavered from the shared objective. They've just had a different view about how to proceed. But if you've seen what Iran has done even in the past few weeks, right, it's nuclear extortion. They're now threatening to leave the NPT. So I did. I talked with my European counterparts while I was there. They have now taken a step under the JCPOA to invoke the dispute resolution mechanism. I think not only they, but the world can now see that this rogue regime has no intention of complying with the central tenets of what that agreement contained, and the world must unite to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear weapon. I saw President Macron say that yesterday. I know he means it now. We need to work together to achieve it.
So when you say they have no intention, then how do you get Tehran to go to the United Nations, to come to the United Nations, to work with the international community aside from the sanctions and the various military response options?
Ultimately, the people of Iran will get what they so richly deserve, a regime that behaves in ways that are consistent with the value sets of the Iranian people. In the end, the Iranian people will demand their government. You see it in the protests. You see it when they walk around American flags that were put down by the Islamic Republic's leadership in an attempt to show they could show pictures of Iranian people walking over American flags. And in fact, people go out of their way not to do that. This isn't about Iran versus the United States. This is about a regime that has treated its own people terribly. The world can see it. It's a regime that even now the IAEA is trying to figure out how nuclear material got to places that the Iranian leadership said it would not be. And so this is a global risk. President Trump started his remarks the night after an American response by saying Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. It is our primary purpose. But we have a broader set of objectives too. We just want them to behave like a normal nation and re-enter the society, the community of nations.
And traveling with you all week, I mean, I'm struck by just the range of the hotspot issues around the world that are going on. And back home, the only thing that they're talking about is impeachment and the Senate impeachment trial. Did that come up at all in your conversations with world leaders? And has the Senate impeachment trial endangered U.S. interests and reputation around the world?
You know, Kevin, it hasn't come up today, except where I received a question at a press conference about it, so it came up.
And you said you would testify.
I've said consistently, if the law required me to testify, I would do so. It hasn't come up. It almost never comes up in meetings with my counterparts. There's too many important things going on in the world. America is too close a partner to have with countries in the Caribbean region here in Kingston. They care about so much that we do. They're such good friends and allies. They see the noise in Washington, but it is not something they would think in the time that we have between us that they would raise.
And House Democrats are saying that Rudy Giuliani orchestrated a shadow foreign policy. And can you assure diplomats serving overseas all around the world in dangerous places that that's not the case?
Yeah, the foreign policy we were executing then is the same foreign policy we're executing today with respect to Ukraine. It's an important country. It sits at this crossroads. It's under enormous pressure from Russia. President Trump has taken actions to counter Russia that President Obama refused to take. We've provided defensive systems for the Ukrainian people so that they can defend themselves. We've supported this new leader, President Zelensky, in his efforts to stamp out corruption and to build his democracy. We're continuing to do that. Our policy with respect to Ukraine has been set on the fundamental principles of reducing the footprint of corruption and helping the Ukrainian people build up a democracy while under threat from the Russians in the east and southeast.
You said that you look forward to going there, that you have other issues that you want to discuss with them, or is that still the case?
Yeah, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there before too long. I had a trip planned, and then we had an issue arise in the Middle East that I had to attend to. While that issue is not behind us, there's still a lot of work to do there.
And that is our chief Washington correspondent, Kevin Cirilli, speaking with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Kevin has been traveling with the Secretary of State, as he noted, on this sort of whirlwind tour of the world. They spoke today in Jamaica, obviously very much on the news, very much on the impeachment news. Ukraine obviously is right in the sphere of influence that the Secretary of State plays into. So him saying that he will make a trip there before too long, given its importance.
And a reminder that there are some kind of big major foreign policy issues that are still out there, right? And that have been kind of plaguing certainly this administration for some time. So we'll see where that goes. All right, coming up though, we're going to talk a little bit about energy, Jason. I was looking at some of the numbers. One of the worst, actually it was the worst performing major industry group in the S&P last year. It still is this year. We talk about oil prices. I was thinking about when oil was $140 a barrel years and years ago. We're in a very different energy environment. So how do you make money?
Right. Well, and what does all of this talk that we have, we've been talking a lot about Bloomberg Green this week, about alternatives when it comes to energy, concern about climate. How does that factor into someone who is looking to make money in the energy sector? We're going to put all of that to Ryan Kelly from Hennessy Funds. He's here in town from North Carolina. That's a mistake to come from North Carolina to New York this time of year. I'm just going to say, I think you should be going the other way.
FYI, you're listening and watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Technology is leading a modest Wall Street rally after the U.S. and France agreed on a global framework for digital taxation. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 51, the S&P 500 up 9, the Nasdaq Composite up 47. Big tech spent heavily on lobbying last year to battle charges of unfair competition and to shape privacy legislation. Facebook boosted spending the most, followed by Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. Google parent Alphabet cut spending. Raytheon's advanced air-to-air missile and Lockheed Martin's F-16 fighter dominated U.S. foreign military sales in fiscal 2019. Data compiled by Bloomberg Government show announced foreign military sales topped $56 billion last year. A big name in digital audio may be on the block. The Wall Street Journal reports the New York Times Company is a potential buyer for Serial Productions, the company behind the true crime podcast Serial. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
B&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you interested in a challenging and
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear, and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
On the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
The action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today. Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Right now, Doctors Without Borders medical teams are operating in some of the most remote and dangerous corners of the world. When front yards become front lines, at the crossroads of conflict and epidemic, where there are no hospitals, that's where we operate. Your response is critical to our response in places where few others will go. That's where we operate. Learn more at doctorswithoutborders.org.
That saying, success breeds success, It's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Messer and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly. Coming up, we're going to talk about the energy sector because didn't do so well in 2019, having another tough time here in 2020. So how do you find an opportunity?
We're going to get the answers to all of those questions and more. But first, let's get to Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on the trade. Hey, Charlie.
Hi, thank you very much, Jason Kelly. Here's what's going on. We have got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing right now. It is an up Wednesday with the S&P higher by 7 right now. Looking at records, 33.28, close to a record right now on the S&P, up 0.2%. No question about NASDAQ, though, up 40 points right now, up 0.4%, 94.11 on the NASDAQ Composite Index, on track for a record close there. The Dow higher by 39, up by 0.1%. 10 years up 230 seconds, yield 1.76%. The World Economic Forum's underway in Davos, Switzerland. Bloomberg Radio and Television are there. And this morning we caught up with Bruno Le Maire, the French finance minister, who talked about Brexit and attracting financial jobs.
Our strategic purpose is to become, within the Eurozone, the first financial center. We want to be very attractive. And when you are looking at the very last decision of many important banks like JP Morgan, the fact that they are putting some new jobs, 450 for JP Morgan in Paris, is very good news for France.
Netflix is facing the toughest year in its history in terms of new streaming competition, but the company says it is ready. After last night's earnings report, Netflix shares moving lower, down now by 3%. Johnson & Johnson also after earnings, falling after the healthcare giant's fourth quarter sales trailed estimates. Johnson & Johnson down now by 0.4%. Gold little change, down 76 cents the ounce, a drop of less than 0.1%, 15.57. We're seeing a sell-off in crude oil today. West Texas Intermediate down 2.7%, 56.79 a barrel. Brent down 2%. We've got more on oil and natural gas coming up in just a moment. Recapping, S&P up 8. That's a gain of 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week here on Bloomberg Radio, streaming live on YouTube. And this is Bloomberg.
We do want to talk a little bit about energy. It's been an interesting market to watch, and I think it's timely, about the launch of our green.
Not interesting if you're in it. If you're long.
If you're shorting.
If you're short, it's great.
But it's interesting in a week where Davos is all about climate change, and we are seeing the energy space certainly be disrupted by alternative energy. It was the worst performing sector, major industry sector in the S&P 500 last year, and it's continuing to be at the bottom of the pack in 2020. Ryan Kelly has to deal with all of this and find the opportunities. He's Senior Vice President and Portfolio Manager at Hennessy Funds. He's back in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. It's not easy right now.
Ryan's sitting here thinking, if I wanted to know all that, I just want to stay at home in Chapel Hill.
Thanks very much.
Can I have come and freeze my butt off to get a recitation of how bad the market is.
Where's my therapy session?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, running a gas and utility or gas utility fund, not easy.
It's actually going okay. It's confusing. Certainly, if you're talking just about the overall energy sector, about oil, about natural gas prices, those have all plummeted. Energy is pretty tough last year, obviously, as you just alluded to. The natural gas side has actually been doing pretty well in one regard. Because of these low prices, it's very good for the end customer. It's very good for the natural gas distribution companies. It's very good for the utilities. And our fund focuses on utilities in general and natural gas utilities specifically. So what we have is that because we've had such affordability, abundance, accessibility of natural gas for many years here, it means actually that natural gas utilities are doing pretty well.
And the fund is up about 2.8% in the past month. So at the beginning of the year, last year it was up about 2.5%. Performance, though, do you feel like it's not where you'd like it to be?
Yeah, performance could have been better. Overall, for the whole year last year, the fund was up 21%. The S&P, of course, up 31%. That's a big laggard. And I think that what's going on is that we also have some larger major pipeline companies that move natural gas around the country. They're related both to oil and natural gas, so there's issues there. That's been holding us back.
And forgive me, I think I said 2.5% last year, and I did just mean year to date, right?
Year to date, yes. Yeah,
but as you said, it was double-digit gains last year.
Yes. And interestingly, though, when you just look at the fundamentals of the companies, the utility space for the last 3 quarters has had the highest growth in earnings out of any of the sectors, which is pretty crazy. This year, this quarter, on a year-over-year basis, it's expected to be up 19% on an EPS point of view.
Which is not the sort of growth that we're seeing elsewhere in the market, to be sure. Well, let's talk about some of those names. One literally close to home, Duke Energy. Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, I think that a couple ways that you can play this space is to buy the bigger utilities. Utilities have a real opportunity now to switch from more traditional fossil fuel type sources to renewables. Duke Energy, DUK, is in the process of doing that. They have very lofty goals of transforming themselves over the next 30 years, and I think there's going to be a nice long runway for that company. It's also a nice large company, $70 billion in market cap. A pretty good PE compared to peers, so I think that there's some opportunity.
I think people forget how massive that company is.
I thought you were saying. I was looking at the dividend. It's almost 4%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So dividend yields are a big part of the utility play, and.
It's interesting. I do think about these big utilities and the transition from, traditional fuels, if you will, or fossil fuels to alternatives. I mean, 20 years? It takes 20, 30 years?
Decades. I mean, they have...
Because of the infrastructure build-out?
Because of the infrastructure. And, one thing I'd maybe like to talk a little bit about is that this future energy complex that we're looking at is probably going to be predominantly renewables and natural gas. Yeah. And that's some of the debate that's going on now. And I think some of the misinformation that's out there is that natural gas is a very important part of all of this.
Right.
We've gotten to lost 2% in greenhouse gas emissions last year because natural gas has been replacing coal in large-scale power plants. So this is a decades-long process to get to more renewables. About 12% or so of our overall energy is produced from renewables right now. It could get to 20s to even 30% over time, but it's going to take a lot to get there.
Why is it? You don't think there's an urgency? I've just got to push a little bit with climate change. We only have about 30 seconds, but I do feel like that there's an urgency all of a sudden. Maybe it's the fires in Australia or California or what have you. But, I feel like the clock is ticking.
I think there is an urgency. I think that we're getting rid of coal. I think that we're producing a lot less energy out of oil. Mm-hmm. Those are two great things. But I think that the amount of infrastructure you'd have to change in order to go straight to renewables is phenomenal. In fact, we'd be hurting the environment until we got there. So we need to do it a little bit more at a measured pace.
All right. We're going to leave it there. Great stuff. Good to catch up with you. Ryan Kelly, Senior Vice President, Portfolio Manager for Hennessy Funds, looking after the Gas Utility Fund. One to watch for sure. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get over to Bob Moon. He's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, why does President Trump keep blocking witnesses and evidence? And House members turned impeachment prosecutors are asking, what is he hiding?
It represents one of the most blatant efforts at a cover-up in history.
Democrat Adam Schiff today making the case for removing Trump from office as Democrats pull no punches in arguments in the Senate. It's the start of 2 days of laying out the case, and Bloomberg's Irv Chapman is following it for us live on Capitol Hill. Irv.
Bob, Chairman Schiff has been laying out practically hour by hour the activities of President Trump and his aides to pressure Ukraine's new president to investigate the Bidens. He recalled Robert Mueller's testimony that the Russians actively helped Donald Trump win election, but the president could not be prosecuted.
He felt emboldened by escaping accountability. The very next day, he's on the phone, President Trump is on the phone with a different foreign power, this time Ukraine, trying to get Ukraine to interfere in the next election, the next day.
Schiff went on to outline the tactics of Rudy Giuliani to get the investigations President Trump demanded and the efforts of others to get the president to back Ukraine against Russia. Bob?
Herb Chapman live on Capitol Hill. Thank you. Anti-government protesters take to the streets in Beirut, complaining that Lebanon's new government will champion more corruption and not be able to curb an economic collapse. One young protester says police have been hurting the demonstrators and that violence in general is common.
We're nothing. We're wearing nothing, normal clothes, and they hit us, and we get hurt, and they don't care.
Protests began back in October when Lebanon's ruling elite came under fire for creating conditions for violence and the economic downturn. Global News 24 hours a day. I'm Bob Moon.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
In-depth analysis.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing right now. Technology shares rallying on the back of upbeat earnings. Also, after the U.S. and France struck a deal on a global framework for digital taxation, oil is tumbling on concern the market is oversupplied. West Texas Intermediate down 2.9%, down $1.69 a barrel, 56.69 right now on WTI. Brent down 2.2%, 63.18 a barrel. Gold is lower by 58 cents the ounce, down less than 0.1%. 10-year up 1/32. The yield now 1.79%. We've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. S&P up 7, a gain of 0.2%. The Dow up 35 points, up 0.1%. NASDAQ higher by 40. That is a gain of 0.4%. Again, recapping, stocks pushing higher. NASDAQ at a record. S&P up 7, up 0.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master along with Jason Kelly, and we are Bloomberg Radio.
Wow, a bold call for the walk-in music for this song, but it is all about the shorts. Just ask Elon Musk. He is the subject of this week's cover story. It's all about Tesla and those shorts, for the moment, being proven dramatically wrong. Dana Hull penned the story. She covers the company day to day, and this is just an amazing step-back story about everything going on there. She joins us from our 960 studio in San Francisco. Joel Weber, the editor of the magazine, he's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Dana, first of all, congrats on this story. It's such a great read. You know, Carol and I got to read it ahead of it over the weekend as it was sort of in process, and it's just such a tale in many ways that captures the spirit of where this company is. Tell us what you set out to do.
Sure. Well, I've been covering Tesla for quite a long time at this point, and unfortunately, for my mental health, spend a lot of time on Twitter, which is really where the Tesla conversation takes place. I mean, it is the water cooler for this company. Elon tweets, the fans tweet, the shorts tweet, and over the past couple of years, I started seeing this Tesla Q hashtag more and more. It really kind of accelerated after the Solar City buyout, and then kind of erupted in 2018 with the whole go private debacle. And I just sort of tried to figure out, well, okay, who is Tesla Q? Who are these guys? And there's so many different characters. But when Tesla filed a restraining order against Skabushka, I sort of found my character and just tried to spend as much time as possible understanding really what his motivation was. And I think what's really fascinating is that a lot of these people are not actual short sellers. Some of them are just skeptics, and they really don't buy the kind of mythology around Musk that has been created.
Skabushka, what?
Skabushka.
Who is that, Dana?
So Skabushka, his real name is Randy Pothy. He is a graduate student in Ann Arbor. He's a fascinating guy. He speaks 5 languages. He's getting a doctoral dissertation in Asian languages and culture, but he grew up in Fremont, which is where Tesla has its factory. And in 2018, when a lot of people were questioning the ability of Tesla to manufacture its Model 3, he was in this rare position to actually check things out because, his parents still live in Fremont. So he started tweeting out these pictures of production that people took very seriously. I mean, you would see on the Tesla fanboy forums, all these messages like Skabushka's production numbers, and they were remarkably accurate. And so he just sort of became this intriguing figure.
Well, intriguing. And didn't you actually talk to us about the first time you reached out to him, Dana? Because I think this is interesting too. I mean, he had information, right? He was tracking this company that to some extent could be helpful.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, so, a lot of short sellers do a lot lot of research, but a lot of them are based in New York, and they're fantastic in terms of like digging into financials and filings, and they look at things on the balance sheet. Skabushka was actually someone who was clearly like going to the factory every day or had a bead on what was happening at the factory. And I live in the Bay Area, and so there was this whole thing where it was clear that Tesla was building some kind of new tent to house its production line. I kept hearing from employees, Elon's building a tent out back. So, and at the same time, Skabushka was sort of posting these photographs. So I was actually at the Fremont BART station looking at this tent, and I wasn't positive if I was looking at like the new tent or an old tent. And so I sent him a picture, and I was like, am I looking at the right thing? And he confirmed it. And I was, legitimately trying to kind of cultivate him as a source. I asked him if he wanted to meet, but he always declined, and I didn't meet him until much later.
So talk to us more about Tesla Q, because that is like, they're on Twitter. They are sort of amazing in sort of this hive mind ability to kind of look at Tesla and Elon from all these different angles, and they've actually impacted the stock over the time. But yet life has gotten very expensive for short sellers of late as Tesla's stock has sort of started to soar. What do you make of where Tesla Q stands now, and what are they saying about what could happen in the year to come?
Especially on a day, right? As you know, Dana, right? We saw Tesla market cap $100 billion, surpassing VW for the first time.
That's a real number.
Yeah, that's a real psychological milestone. Sure. Well, I guess I would say that once you a lot of folks within Tesla Q, they view Musk through the lens of fraud or fabrication or a cult of personality, and once you see him through that lens, it's very difficult to kind of be moved from that. Just like, the fans who see him as like, our great hope for solving climate change, they will not be moved either. So it's a very bifurcated community. But I think, short sellers would probably say, or yes, the stock is on a tear, but it's completely divorced from fundamentals. And, just because the stock is high doesn't mean that the company is ever going to be sustainably profitable. Clearly, Tesla reported a profit in the third quarter. They're going to report earnings next week. But, will the company ever have a profitable year? Like that remains to be seen.
And why ultimately is this stock, this company, so binary? I know we ask you this all the time, but I keep coming back to this idea that there's essentially no one who's like, yeah, Tesla's all right. Yeah, like it just doesn't happen. So sure. Why is it?
I think it's like a 2-for-1, right? So you can short Apple, you can short Netflix, you can short Amazon, but people aren't really like shorting Tim Cook or Bezos they're really, this is really about Elon, and Elon himself trolls the short sellers all the time. And so it's become this long running war that is very personal between both sides. And it's people are shorting the company because they fundamentally do not believe Elon and the hype that he has created around himself. And so they fundamentally have issues with him as the chief executive and with the company. The go private thing was just kind of like the icing on the cake. Yeah. Once that happened, like Tesla Q just doubled down, and they will not be moved. They will not be moved. Now, to be clear, some of them, everyone has a very different trading thing. Some people are swing traders. They trade every day. Some are puts. Some are options. Some people, like, they might consider themselves a short, but they might not have have an active short position at this moment. I mean, that gets into like everyone has a fundamentally different strategy when it comes to how they trade.
Okay, so Dan, closing question for you. You cover Elon, Tesla so closely. This was a kind of a longer term story that is your first cover for the magazine. What did you learn?
That's a really good question. I mean, I guess what I learned was just how kind of diverse this community of Tesla Q is. I mean, to be honest, when I first saw Skabushka's tweets, I thought that this guy was either a supplier or a contractor or an employee or a former employee. Like, I never would have guessed in a million years that he was a graduate student. I thought for sure this guy must have some kind of in with the company. But his research was so profoundly good. And then when I met him, I was like, wait, you're like a graduate student writing a doctoral dissertation?
You're just like a guy. Yeah.
Just like a guy.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a great story, a must-read, the cover story in this week's magazine. Joel Weber, thanks to you, editor, Bloomberg Business Week. At Dana Hull, she wrote the story, tech reporter for Bloomberg, joining us from San Francisco.
I'm going to tweet it out right now as we speak. Coming up, we're going to check on the bond and the day's economic news. Stick around. That's coming up on Bloomberg.
News with boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time, skip, mix it up, run, mix it out of boxing class, skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing until March. T's and